This week on the program, co-owner of the Electric Bat Arcade in Tempe, Arizona, Cale Hernandez. Home pinball collector and YouTube sensation, Retro Ralph. Location player and Facebook Reels extraordinaire, Jamie Burchell. And joining us this week for a very special interview, Stern Pinball's Chief Creative Officer and toy maker legend, George Gomez. This week on the JBS Roundtable.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pinball Roundtable. Today's special guest, right? But let's introduce Retro Ralph and Cale Hernandez. I am Jamie Burchell, and we have with us Executive Vice President and Creative Director of Stern Pinball, George Gomez. Thank you, George, so much for joining the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
We really appreciate it. And we want to give a thank you to Carrie Hardy. Carrie interviewed you last week. It was a really great interview, and we made sure that we're not going to double those questions at all. No one's wearing any anti-Stern shirts, so we're in good shape.
Yeah. All good.
All good, and I think
Wait, I didn't even notice this. Was there an anti-Stern shirt?
Well, Carrie's got some interesting ones. And so, I didn't think of it as an anti-Stern shirt. He said it.
Okay.
I think it's Stern with devil horns, so I'd call that kind of anti.
Right,
I don't know.
But I think,
I thought it looked cool.
yeah, it was cool.
And you wouldn't expect anything less from me. I'm drinking out of a Stern glass, so there
you go.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Yeah, I think Carrie's shirt had horns on the pinball in the Stern logo or something, I think.
Well, I hope he sells a lot of them on silverballswag.com or wherever he sells his.
I might have to get one.
Yeah, you might.
You should, yeah.
Cale, why don't you start us off, sir?
All right, let's get right into it. This is going to be fun. Thank you so much for joining us, George. This is an absolute pleasure. I'm 50 years young, and I've been playing games that have your fingerprints on it since I was a child. So this is really a special thing here. But let's get right into it. I want to talk about the game you're designing right now. And I know you can't say much about it, but the aspect I want to get into is that when in the past, when you've taken over a game from a designer, you usually scrap the design and start over. From what you're saying and what Jack's saying, you didn't do that this time.
That's right.
Why?
So this is a slightly different scenario, right? I think everybody understands the drama associated with the original Deadpool design, where the designer got in trouble, legal trouble. We had to, the company had to cut ties with him. The facts behind the story were dramatic and difficult, and the team was demoralized, and we needed to, I needed an absolute fresh start, right? And so I asked the company. I've said this many times, so I think people have heard this. I asked the company. We were X number of months into it, quite a bit actually. I think it was 6 months into it or something. And I said, I don't want the story. I don't want the conversation, even though I'm going to have to address it when I do the podcast circuit to promote the game. So, and everyone's going to ask me about it. And I want to clean, I want to go right to it and say, I balled up the design. I threw it out. I started over. Yes, this happened. Let's move on, right? And that's exactly what happened. I'm very happy we did it. That's precisely what happened. In the case of James Bond, I had a different situation. My friend Steve Ritchie said, "Hey, I don't want to, I want to go pursue, a different opportunity." He was very clear with me. He said, I want to retire someday. I want to, I want more freedom to do different things. And hey, go to it. and he was months into the Bond design, and I said, I just don't, I didn't feel good about, finishing what he had started. And on top of that, that licensor was super difficult. So I thought to myself, I'm gonna have to defend work I didn't do, and that's difficult in and of itself. So again, I balled it up and started over. I'm very happy I did. I think the community's happy I did. Yeah, that was the scenario. This is very different. Jack is actively a part of the company. Jack has a very special set of talents beyond being a creative guy. He had a relationship with the community that pre-existed the company, and we think that the company needs a presence of that sort to relate to the community. And so, we said, hey, are we really leveraging, his talents the best way? And on top of that, do we have anybody that can even come close to doing that work? And we don't. So he was the natural choice, and he was, very involved, and he started the project. He was the designer of record on the project, and he laid out the playfield, conceptualized the toys, was working very closely with the lead developer on the project, is Tanyo Kleiss. You guys know Tanyo and I collaborated on Deadpool, and Jack and Tanyo collaborated on Foo. So both of us had a relationship with Tanyo, and a good working relationship. Tanyo's backed up by some super talented young guys that are both fairly new to the company, but they're hardcore pinball guys, and they're so into the theme we're working on, and they've made a huge contribution. Josh Henderson and Andrew Wilkening, and so that's the team. And honestly, Jack had a lot of it done, and meaning he had a whitewood, he was flipping a whitewood. One side of the game was kind of unresolved, meaning that he had a lot of things that, the intent was there, but they weren't quite working. So I jumped in to kind of take it the rest of the way and bring it home, right? Again, big license, licensor with a lot of input, a lot of opinions on how the property is handled, and so I have a lot of experience with that, more so than Jack in this case. And so it's a combination of, I did a lot to polish the kinetics, get the shots just right, make everything kind of feel right, and kind of lead the team the rest of the way. And that's really the thing. And, we're both going to sign the game when the limited editions come out. They have both of our signatures. It's collaborations with designers. They're not as rare as you guys would think, or you guys have heard. I'll tell you a story. I don't know if you know, back in the day when the first Elvira was happening, the Bally guys had just been brought inside to Williams, during the acquisition, when in the late 80s, when Williams Electronics acquired Bally and Midway, and the Elvira product was in the works, and Dennis, hurt his leg in a in a motorcycle accident, both him and Steve rode dirt bikes, and Dennis hurt himself and he was in the hospital, couldn't finish the game, and Steve stepped in. And so Steve took that original Elvira and, fixed some things, did some things that needed to be done. So it's not unheard of. Along the same lines, there's a game called Truck Stop, which I don't know if you know, a Dan Langlois game. And Jim Patla worked on that game. And I can't think of the other designer now. There was another Williams designer that worked on it, but so it's not unheard of, at all. And honestly, I have a lot of stuff on my plate, but I'm a jack of all trades in terms of getting a lot of stuff done. I step in when I need to. You guys know that I talked to Carrie about the cabinet project was my project. You guys just saw the Star Wars topper today, right? I did that. So, the team was jammed up. John was up to his eyeballs in work, and I'll take the topper. And so I said, hey, I'm going to leverage some stuff we have. I'm going to create some new stuff, and we'll work it out. And so, I'm all about moving the ball, right? So I will do whatever it takes. No job is too small for me. No job is beneath me. I'll do whatever it takes to get it done. So
that's a good follow-up. Like, what yard line was the game at, right?
You talk about Jack's game?
Yes.
Like a couple of Whitewoods in, I think, maybe Whitewood 2 or something. I can't, I think when him and I go on when we do this again after the game is announced and we can actually talk more intelligently about it, I hope to, be able to show photos of those early Whitewoods and stuff. I mean, I didn't, I rearranged some of his stuff, but I didn't take anything away. And I didn't, it's like I worked really hard to keep his design intent. Look, I mean, Jack's done 3 games or something. I've done 20. I know my way around some ball guides and ramps and stuff. I can make these things work pretty well. So,
George, since we're talking about game design and everything, is there something I kind of find it fascinating because you obviously oversee the whole studio. So is there some like design rule that you personally believe in that's like a big thing for you that like some of the designers as Stern, like your designers on your team, disagree with? Like, is there something you are like, oh my gosh, this is something I love to do, but the team disagrees with it?
I don't know that there's disagreement. I think that I preach great simplicity, right? So give me 5 great things, not 18 mediocre ones. So and so, sometimes it's challenging, right? Because there are guys that want to put a tremendous amount of content and depth into the games. And there's nothing wrong with that. Our games are all over the map in terms of depth and content, meaning that I think that different designers, different developers deal with the problem slightly differently, right? Like look at the depth in Dungeons and Dragons, right? I mean, here's a game that, and we had to rein Dwight in because he was
his
so
flow chart would be pretty big, wouldn't it?
Oh man, and I think that and that hits a certain spot in the community, in the world, in the fan base, etc. But look at a game like Deadpool, right? It's like I had a very short period of time. I didn't have there is no giant toy. There is no Batman turntable. There is no Batman crane. There's none of that. And so I'm not a believer that more is necessarily better. I think that doing with what you have is the magic, right? And I think the other thing that happens is that when you have a manageable amount of content, you have more opportunity to iterate. And the only way you can ever get to fun is to iterate. There's no one, myself included, no one can, you play it in your head, you try to predict the fun. The reality is that when you build this thing and it all starts coming together, the lights, sounds, choreography, video content, that's when you really start understanding, is it fun, and can it be, how do I make it more fun, right? And look at any of the games and, the speech call outs, the timing, the choreography on the speech call outs, Deadpool making fun of you, right? James Bond saying funny, James Bond lines and all that stuff is like, that's when you're starting to get to, okay, is it fun?
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to hold on to the idea of code and rules and things like that, because we're going to get back to that in a minute. But I'm just so curious, because you've been in this for a really long time, for a large portion of your career. So is there something, and this is going to be a little forward looking though, is there something technology wise that you want to see integrated into pinball that you've thought about that just doesn't exist today, and you've never seen anybody do it, anybody talk about it?
It's a good question. I think that,
There you go, Ralph.
you know, I've dabbled in a lot of things, right? I was very early in with the concept of, a version of AR, right? With Pinball 2000.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, Insider Connected was born of my experience trying to put, at the birth of Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. I happened to be leading a video game design team for Xbox and PlayStation. I had to put those games online, and that experience really kind of informed what I did with Insider Connected many years later, of course, because I said, when I have to connect the pinball machines, I kind of want to do it in a way that makes sense to pinball. I don't necessarily just want to kind of clone Xbox Live, because many of the things on Xbox Live don't work in pinball. But some things do, right? Like I thought, I can make achievements way cooler than them. And I can do quests, and I can do, I want player stats, and every day we're adding stuff to that. I wish we had more developers that we could focus on it, because there's just a firestorm of ideas relative to what to do with the platform. And, and
really
you guys,
is.
by the way, the
You
community,
talk
you guys
about it all
come,
the time.
you guys come at me with it stuff all the time, right? I get suggestions, do this, do that.
I wish you had more people. I'm a recruiter. Maybe I can help find you some, but they are hard to find. And we love Insider Connect. It's fantastic what you guys have done there.
Yeah, I love, every time I see Electric Bat talking about it, you guys really, you guys understand. Guys get it. You guys totally get it. It was like, I'm like, man, look at this. I couldn't write this copy.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
When you guys were doing, you're still doing it. When you started the Beat My Score thing, because I go to Electric Bat. I try to go every Tuesday. That's league night, and like 5 people came up to me and they go, I got your badge. Like they were so excited. They were like, I worked at Kong and I got your badge. My score wasn't amazing, but it was like, it wasn't super easy to get. And that's cool, right? Because it started us talking about, even though he showed we got the badge, now all of a sudden I didn't even know some of the people that came out to me. So now I'm forming these new relationships based on a badge that someone got for playing a game, which was pretty cool. So George, there's not one thing you could think of, like not one like technology thing that you think of.
It's hard to say, because I think about, I guess I think about the business all the time, and I think about just like real future looking stuff. Like I mentioned this when Carrie talked to me about the cabinet. I have someday, it's like and I'm never sure if I should share it, because like someday we might do some of it or whatever, but I had some really futuristic stuff in the cabinet design. And when I did my own critique, I was like, they're never going to accept this. They're going to beat the crap out of me for this. So it's kind of like, you guys, everybody says they want new, but not really. So everybody kind of want, so it's like the form factor of a pinball machine like could be so different, but yet everybody says, it's like designing a Jeep. If when you're done, it doesn't look like a Jeep, the Jeep guys will absolutely set you on fire. So I think pinball is a little bit of that. And so you have to do evolutionary stuff. You can't do revolutionary stuff to some extent. I mean, there's revolutionary stuff like in a space where nothing existed. Like Insider Connected, right? There was, people had connected pinball machines and stuff, but they weren't doing anything with it, right?
Right.
Nothing of note. And so that was an opportunity where I could, here's a blank sheet of paper. I can do anything I want, because the stuff that people are doing is just not that interesting. But in the form factor of a pinball machine, man, I'll tell you what, I would love to show you some of those cabinet sketches, because I think they're cool. I just think, I'm an industrial designer by trade. I look at how products are designed in the world, and so when I look at a pinball machine, I think my product could look like the products that are made in 2025 in the rest of the world. But yeah, my community's not going to, they're not exactly there. So I have to kind of take baby steps and evolve what they accept. I can't revolutionize what they know.
Well, I think some of that awareness is good because I'm going to share a super quick story with you. I'm at Pinball Expo and I go over to Chris Turner, who brought Ninja Eclipse. And I was the first time I saw it, and he's got a little notebook. He looked a little defeated, and I go, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh man," it's like, "I just wanted to get some feedback from you." And I'm giving him feedback, and I was like, "Well, what are other people saying?" And he's like, "Well, the last 10 people said it looks like a virtual pinball cabinet, and they hate the cabinet." And I don't know if you ever saw his initial design, but it was really like slim and sleek, and he changed it because the majority of the feedback was about the cabinet.
It's funny, if you think back to, I don't know if you've ever seen the very first home editions I did, like, 12 years ago or whatever, right? The little ones that,
the ones with
they had
metal,
they had
like
a powder
transformers
coated
and stuff, right?
Powder coated cabinet. And they had a hood that I actually raised up. It's very similar to what Chris is doing with his glass, where the glass was integrated into the front molding, and in mine, you lifted it up, and you could free a ball trap without like going through the rigmarole of unlatching the bar. There's no place to put it. You got to be careful with the glass. If you set the glass on the corner, you're going to shatter it. All this stuff, and it was done with the notion that, we're trying to get people that don't know the secret sauce that we know, right? You guys walk up to a pinball machine, you don't even think about it. You just open the coin door, unlatch it, pull the glass out. You don't even think about it. You know how to place the glass without breaking it. All that stuff. But I'm trying to grow the audience, right? That's what the Costco games are about. I'm trying to get a whole new people the Costco, it's like it's a bit of a gateway drug. There's people that buy the Costco game, and we've seen this numerous times, and then they upgrade. They've had it for some amount of time, and they say, "Oh, I want one of the big ones." And so that is doing, that's exactly what it's supposed to do, right? It's a Trojan horse. I get it in your house. You realize how cool this thing is. You got to have another one. And so, and for some people, it's not. For some people, it's simply, here's a more affordable game, and this is all I need. I got some young kids. They're never going to dig deep into rules, or they don't, they're not going to beat me up because it doesn't have some giant animatronic. They're just having fun with it. And so, it's, I think, it's some of the thoughts. I'm just giving you some of the thinking behind some of the things we do.
Yeah, Cale, I think the next one's a question from you, right? Switching gears a little bit.
Yeah, I'll go with it. George, in a recent podcast, Keith Elwin mentioned that Seth had some design input into King Kong. What are the growing pains of having a non-pinball guy involved in the design process? Is it hard to explain to someone who came from outside the industry why you can add something or why you can't remove something from a design?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this, right? So, first of all, he's a really bright guy. So it didn't take him a long time to sort of get the vibe of what we do. And he, he's sensitive enough about the magic that he knows that, he's never going to be the final word on what a designer should or shouldn't do. He's going to have opinions that are going to be taken under, but at the end of the day, I'm the subject matter expert in the building that can either kill or advance your design, right? Because and even me, I use the talent around me to help me to clarity when I'm unsure, right? I'll get all these guys in a room and say, what do you guys think? So I think Seth is, you know, he came from video games, has a lot of experience with video games. He understands presentation. He understands the notion of choreography, understands the evolution of play and the progression through a game. He knows all that stuff. And so, you know, he comes to it with that. So when he, you know, you say design input, well, he's the CEO, he's going to have opinions, and so does Gary. And Gary's been in it all his life, and to this day he still struggles to play pinball. so I think that you have to kind of, you know, you have to yes, everyone in the building is going to have opinions. Look, the sales guys have opinions, right? Everybody at marketing, manufacturing guys have opinions. Everybody plays the games. We're lucky to have this conglomeration of input. And I don't, I'll tell you that, like I said, I'm the subject matter expert. It lives or dies based on do I you know, am I going to allow that or am I not going to allow that? I mean, I'm not, and I'm, by the way, I'm not that. I don't mean that to sound like I'm some dictator with this stuff, because I'm not. And a lot of times I let these guys try things and I let them convince me. You know, Elwin was the first guy in a long time to put a center post on a Stern pinball machine. And when I came up at Williams, that was considered a crutch, a bad design crutch. And I told him that. I said, look, if you were a designer in the Williams, you know, pinball department, when I was coming up, people would have been making fun of you for this. And they would have said, you have some problem and you got to fix your problem. And this isn't the fix. This is a thing you do at the 11th hour because your game's on the line and you're draining down the middle. That's what this is. And we had the conversation. And at the end of the day, he's one of the best players in the world. So he's clearly going to have a little bit more sway with me on that. But I had to explain to him, this is the perception from the time when I came up. God forbid I should have done that, right? Jack's done the same. Jack said to me, Jack picked it up, did it, and I had the same conversation with him. And again, he showed me. He brought me to the game. We played together, and he showed me. He said, "Well, I think I need it." And by the way, the world is different now. There used to be a time when I was coming up, the success of a pinball machine was entirely based on how much money was in the cash box and nothing else. It wasn't based on how pretty it was. Wasn't based on what was under the glass or anything else. It was like, is this thing making, a couple $100 a week? If so, you're a success. If it's not, you're a failure. That's it. Done.
So George,
and
was
so
it?
Now we live in a world where 70% of the pinball machines that Stern Pinball makes go into the home. So that's a little different. So that's why all of a sudden that post between the flippers is way more acceptable.
Yeah. So would the conversation be back then, that's going to make the ball times too long, and therefore, that's
right. And I don't know if you ever see, there's a bunch of threads in the Deadpool forums where people say, isn't there supposed to be a rubber on this outlane post by the inlanes? And I was like, yeah, they're in the cash box because your game, you're going to extend the play time on your game. And I designed them the way I always did for the street. And yes, you can close them down. You can close down my lanes. You can add the rubber. You can make the game easier. It's your game. I want you to have fun with your game. However it is you want to. You want to make your game flat. Make your game flat. You want to make your game steep. Make your game steep. I just want you to have fun with it. I really don't care. But my choice, how I design them, how I play, how I'm used to. That's the way they go out the door. And after that, you can do whatever you want with it. It's your game.
I'm an operator, and I've never understood that whole thing where operators want fast playing games, because if anybody's paid attention to the top earning games, we talk about on the podcast, it's always the Elwin games, and they're the longest playing games. I've found that the longer playing games are actually making more money.
So Cale, the difference between your environment and the environment in the 90s is that there were lines of people to play. And so, you know, and that's really, it was strictly a throughput issue. How many people can you get through the location? And a location, by the way, in those days, the other anomaly is that in those days, a location with more than 5 games was a rarity. Okay. So, you know, the wall of pinball machines was 5, 6 games. It wasn't what you have. It wasn't, you know, what we see today in the dedicated pinball locations. There's another thing that the player was a little different because it was a player that may be very good, but his involvement in the hobby was, this is a place I stop at on the way home to get a beer, or this is a place I go to hang out with my friends. He didn't know, you know, they didn't, that the notion of a player understanding who the designers were, or giving a crap about who the designers were, or geeking out on all the stuff that players geek out on today, that was non-existent, right? I tell people all the time, one of the challenges we face today is that the product began life as a product for commercial operations, and there were the quality level of like the fit and finish on materials and all that stuff was really designed around those environments. So, you know, all that black paint, every operator on the planet had a can of black spray paint. No operator on the planet was sending something back because there was a bubble in the decal. There was no operator.
Good,
absolutely
good.
Yeah, no. I mean, there was never was a guy, you know, like the way it used to work is a machine would come out of the box, and the big distributors would literally put a machine on legs, have a tech go through it. Operator showed up in his truck, picked it up, drove it to his location, put it in his location. The game, an operator back then, especially a street operator, he rotated his games. The durability of cabinets and stuff like that was based on him having to put that thing on and off a pickup truck, move it across the city. I'm taking this Adams Family out of the 7-Eleven. I'm putting it in the bowling alley. I'm taking the fishtails in the bowling alley. I'm putting it where the 7-Eleven was. Every 3 weeks, he rotated his games to keep his earnings, to make his earnings, to keep the location fresh, make the earnings, you know, what they needed to be. And those games went through hell. That's why when you buy a 90s game that's been on the street, you get what you get, right? That's what it is. That's how that was operated. It never, you know, it's like a home use game from that era was a rarity, right? And you know, the world market in pinball back then was like 50,000 machines a year, right? So, you know, I think we're probably over half of that, but not, you know, we're not 50,000 games a year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I want to see, and my favorite thing back when I was a kid was behind the scenes of Star Wars. I had books. You'd watch HBO. They have these specials in between movies, the making of. And you've been posting some very cool stuff recently on Instagram. I don't know if it's on Facebook also, but I've seen it on Instagram, drawings, old photos. You mentioned you're going to show some the whitewoods of whatever you guys are working on right now. Can we get more? People love this behind the scenes stuff, and I think it's been missing from pinball.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Jack loves to do it, by the way. I mean, he's constantly like a lot of his tinkering that he just likes to do on his studio. And I don't know if you saw that little thing that he put together for Expo.
Oh yeah, that was
tiny little thing. It was so fun, right?
George, that little thing has, I posted it because I filmed it and posted it. It has like 200,000 views. People were obsessed with it.
And
So
I walked up to, he said to me, have you flipped it while we were at the show? You know, have you flipped it? I said, no. And it's like, you know, there's a night it's become a thing. There's a night where I walk the floor with all my designers, right? And people in the homebrew love it. They love us playing their games, and they love to talk to us about what they did and how they did it. And it's really fun. And so, and that night we walked the floor, and I got on that thing. I couldn't leave it alone. I was like,
Right?
and
very
really,
addicting.
honestly, that shows you what you can do, and that is where the fun lies, right? It's like it begins there.
Right.
Steve Ritchie, who was an early mentor when I started designing pinball machines, said to me one day, after flipping one of my early whitewoods, like Johnny Mnemonic, or I don't know what it was, but it was an early whitewood. And he said to me, he goes, "You got something, because when you don't have any sounds, you don't have any lights, you don't have any rules, you don't have anything. If this playfield is fun to flip, that's where it begins." And he wasn't wrong. And I've used that kind of, when I talk to my designers, when I do my own stuff, if the thing is fun to flip with nothing in it, that's a great start, because that once you start layering in all the stuff, you're ahead of the game, right? It's when you get a playfield that doesn't do much, and you're going to try to fix it by doing other stuff. That's when you struggle, right? That's WWE. That's our WWE, right? That's like, like, man, when we did that game, I threw everybody at it. I threw Lyman at it. I sent one home with him. I said, "See what you can do." And there was a limited, there's a limited amount of things that you can do. So you got to start from like that thing that Jack had, right? Just flip it. It's fun.
For sure. So, how much, like, if Ralph and I have talked about, we would love to have that thing on our desk. If you put a little paint on it, how much would that thing cost us?
I mean, really, it's the playfield and all that stuff is not the cost. It's like, what are you going to drive it with? So we'd almost have to take an Arduino or something and create some kind of little device to drive it. You get into it. It gets the problem is it gets dicey. You need 48 volts. You got to find 48 volts. You need a power supply. You need 48 volts. You need all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think he did it with somebody's system. Was it Fast? I can't remember who. It wasn't our system. I don't think it was our system. I think it was one of the hobbyist systems. And I mean, that's where your money's going to be. It's not going to be in anything else. That piece of wood, the couple of flippers, not a big deal.
Although when I was talking to him about it, he said to me, I said, "Hey, Jack, could you put this many spinners in a game?" He's like, "I think they would kill me because it'd be too expensive." Are spinners really that expensive? Like, why is a spinner so expensive?
It's so the calculus that everybody does, and it's not that one thing. It's like all of the stuff, and so you come down to, what do we're a business, so we don't, and some of the other people in the space that manufacture pinball machines, maybe they don't need the margins we need, or maybe they're not aware, or they're not as business savvy. I mean, you guys deal with us. We're the game developers, the design studio, the designers, the artists, etc. But we're a real company. We've got, we got a CFO. We got a whole bunch of, financial people and accountants and everything else. And so when you look at how much I can put in a game versus what I have to sell it for, there's a middleman in here, right? Somebody's got the dealer and distributors they have to make a buck. So we try, the discipline of business, by the way, is what has built us. Meaning that when I joined the company, I said this on Kerry's show, I had 9 people in the studio, and there were 35 people in the factory. Today, I got 55 people in the studio, another 30 consultants. I got 150 people in the factory, in the front office, and 500 people in the factory. How did we get here? Well, it was everything that you do in life, there's an element of luck, there's an element of work, there's an element of discipline. And discipline means you want to make great, amazing stuff, but you got to sell it for a price. And, that means paying attention to what things cost you. And I'm not a big fan of, I think the constraints of the sandbox are what yield creativity. The open checkbook, not so much.
I had a quick follow-up about the homebrew section. First of all, they must geek out like crazy when you walk by with your design team, right?
I think they love it, and we love it too. We love seeing the energy, the passion.
Let's give a quick shout out to a couple that you might like. All right, let's give a shout out to them. Was there one this year?
Oh my God, there were so many. There's a bunch of them. That a couple of years ago, this past year was actually light because there was a lot of stuff that had been there the year before. Mm-hmm. But the year before, the kid that did Portal was awesome. The kid that there was a Pokemon that was really well done. There was Tanner Petch with all of the wild, crazy playfields that he's made, right? Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, there was just a lot of just ingenuity and passion and the work that goes into those things. I mean, I know what it takes to make the real one. So I total respect when I see what some guy did in his garage, and you talk about in the garage, right? Keith Elwin is here today because of that Archer prototype that he built and that I saw and said, man, the level of just the finish and complexity of this for a garage build is impressive. Imagine if he had resources, what he could do, and that proved to be the right choice on my part. Right?
Good move. Good move. That was a good move. Good call. All right, Ralph, take us back to the pinball code, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I was thinking we'd shift gears because Cale and I both had some questions around like code and rules and just accessibility to pinball in general. One thing that I think about this a lot, and it's interesting because I came over from arcade gaming, and then everyone always said you're going to buy one pinball machine and that's over all your arcade games, all your retro stuff's going to go out the window, and it did like right away, really quickly too. Within a couple of years, I had sold off everything to fund the pinball hobby. But as I've gotten into it longer, I'm now very comfortable with the deep level the code can get. But I can't help but think about, because I have people that come to me almost all the time now because I tend to be the podcaster who doesn't go too deep into like that people listening to me won't understand what I'm saying. So I try to keep it, for everybody. But I got to think, like, how do you approach this? Because you've said it on many shows where you want to bring new people in, but you can't ignore the fact that there are people that get deep into the hobby. So they want this deepness to the code. They want this complexity. So how do you approach this with your team? Because you have to somehow have a common ground where it's going to still be easy enough for the casual to come up and have some fun with it, but then you're not boring the hardcore players. So like, what is the philosophy? Because I feel like this is not an easy challenge.
Easy to learn, hard to master, right? Yeah. So it's actually easier to engage the hardcore than it is to engage the novice. And what do I mean? Well, a novice, philosophically, we talk about, where's that first multi-ball? We talk about, in the studio, we try to design from the start button up, right? So that's why, I don't want anybody thinking about a wizard mode, for a while. I want everybody working on, what's that first multi-ball? What's that easy multi-ball? What's the thing that every novice, how do we get something where every novice think that was fun, I want to do it again, right? So that's why Bash Toys, again, I've said this before in the podcast, right? But there's so let's talk about design philosophy, right? So a novice flips early. And so why does he flip early? He flips early because he's afraid the ball's going to go off the end of the flipper. So what happens when you flip early? What happens is you're in the bozo zone. The bozo zone is a 30-degree cone emanating from the center of the flippers going up playfield. If you put stuff there, a novice is going to be able to interact with it. That's why we like bash toys. That's why, the dragon is where it is in D&D. That's why the rocket is where it is in Bond. That's why little Deadpool's where he is, right? Because those are easy things. They can't aim. They just flip. So, but if you interact with that thing some number of times, good things will happen. So that's a beginning, right? That's a beginning. The other thing is no one plays your games the way you envisioned they were going to be played in their head. That's the nature of all games. Video games, whatever you want, strategy board games, no one plays the way the designer envisioned. So that means that a player can do something anytime, any place, anywhere. They can do something, and you have got to let all that stuff that he's going to do that you didn't intend for him to do, like you're lighting the arrow on the right side of the playfield, but he shot on the left, right? And so nothing can be dead. Everything has to be alive, even when the thing he's doing is not the thing you intended. That's got to give you some feedback. That's got to give you something that, you gotta feel the reaction, whether it's sounds and light. Of course, it's not going to be as big as if he did the right thing, but something's got to be there. My Lord of the Rings playfield, which I'm sure everybody's played it. I learned a thing about that. I taught myself a thing inadvertently when I designed that playfield. And that is, even when you brick the shot, the ball's going to go somewhere interesting. And so I've kind of kept that in my head a lot ever since then, and said, you remember how on that game, like I meant to do that, but I instead, I bricked it and it bounced over there and it fell into a thing and it returned it to the ramp. That's the kind of stuff you want. And there's a couple of guys in the building who do it really well. Elwin does it really well, right? He knows a lot about, he pays a lot of attention to what happens when they don't do what you want. So, I mean, that's a thing.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Ralph.
It's just a quick follow-up. It's a little bit of feedback more than it is a question, but the one thing that I think that you guys could do more of, and this goes into what you were saying. You guys are a business. You're in this to provide fun products but also to make money. And I think sometimes and I think it would help sales when you guys do these streams to reveal a game. You've got some of the top players playing it, like you've got Mayday, and that's great. But I think sometimes, if there was maybe a supplemental piece of content that's showing people how to play versus not just the rule sheet, because George, I check out on the rule sheet. I leave my body, as Jamie says. I start reading and I'm like, this is too much. So how I learn is like playing with Kale and playing with Jamie, and like Jamie's so good at Batman 66. He's like, you got to do these things, and I'm like, okay, cool. And then that opens up the game for me, and it makes me like it more. Once I go, because it's that payoff. It's not just the easy multi-ball now. Now I'm going, oh, wow, if I do these shots in sequence, I get this reward, or I progress through a mode.
I'm all about Egghead, George.
Yeah.
I'm all about Egghead.
But I can't help but feel like you would sell more games.
I really, that's the kind of, that's great. Ralph, you're right. That's 100%. You're spot on. That's a thing that we could do a lot better than we do. And I think it would make a lot of sense, or it would have an effect, I should say. I mean, it's like, we're somewhat conditioned to how rough people are with us when we debut stuff, and so we want to try to show it in its best light. And so I think that you get Nick Wayna on the game, and Josh Henderson, and you get some shooters in there, and they're going to show off the game.
Yeah.
So I think that's really why it's done. But I think your point is taken. I think there's, the games in here, I'm not, I'm hardly a great player, and I never read the rules and I never pay attention. I sort of follow the game. So when I walk up to the game, I will just flip it to see what happens. And I know to follow the lights. I know philosophically, I understand what the team was thinking. I may not know the nuance of how they executed it until I've spent some time with it. And so that's how I play them. I walk up, I start flipping, see what game does, how it reacts, where am I going to get, and I mean, look, I got guys like Mike Vinacore, Cale, Mike well, right? He's, he's all about the intricacies of layering, right? And so, and sometimes when he explains it to me, I say, Mike, I'm not sure I'm going to get it until I play it. You know what I mean? And then it's like on Bond, I laid out like really high level, like, hey, I got 6 films, I got 6 villains, 6 weapon sets, 6 Bond women. It's like I got 6 minor villains. I'm gonna structure this so that this is going to be your progression through the game, right? But, somebody like Lonnie and Mike took it, and they took it to another level, right? They took the bones of what I gave them and said, oh, but we could do this and this, or we could start this at the same time as that, or we could make this dependent on that. So that, that's an art in and of itself, right?
But with those videos, do you think, like Ralph was saying, me and him were talking the other night, the 3 of us talked too much, and we were thinking on the home screen, when you put your name in, maybe there's some videos there. It probably wouldn't take much.
No. Have you seen those? We haven't been consistent, but we have for a while. We were making videos that showed you really rudimentary shots. I mean, in the attract mode, right? And so what you're talking about is a little bit more of that, or making that more available, because those were pretty clear, right? Like, the arrows going, do this, do that.
But it would be cool, like on 007, you brought a 007.
Yeah.
If on the home screen, or on, when you go in your Insider Connect and you put your name, which is so brilliant too, by the way, for home users, is it had a video, it said how to get to 007, right? How to get your minor villain, how to get your major villain, how to get, Orange Q, by the way. That's a little OP. You might want to work on Orange Q, because a lot of people in the tournament killing Orange Q, George. But that, I think that could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know where you guys did it? You know where you guys did it? Where I was learning about games I already owned when you guys did the Pinball Cup. I don't know if that was your idea or who gave that idea, but they were like small. It
wasn't my idea. Yeah.
So they were small, like, hey, do this thing and you're going to get points for a Pinball Cup.
Yeah.
But it showed you how to do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know how to do that. And now I do. And then I'm obsessed with it because I want more points for Pinball Cup. So I kept repeating that same thing. So I got really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Pinball Cup, definitely. Those kinds of things are absolutely, we got to do more of it, especially when people pick up on it, right? We can tell what's happening now because we see it, right?
Well, George, there was a couple SOBs. There were a couple SOBs that were taken off the glass. I'm sorry, because I was calculating how long it would take to achieve that. And then the points people were getting per day, and I was like, some of these guys at the top, they don't work and they're playing pinball for 24 hours a day, or they took the damn glass off, because this isn't even possible. I did all the math, George. It wasn't even possible. But other than that, it was really fun.
Interestingly enough, a lot of IC has been self-policed, meaning that the community has been pretty good with it.
Yeah, for the most part, people are fair and not cheating. I think
I gotta tell you, in the beginning, even leaderboards, I've also said this publicly. You know, when we were coming up with ideas, a lot of the tournament players in the building said, "Nah, they're just going to pull the glass. Don't do leaderboards. They're just going to pull the glass and
What fun is
cheat
that,
it, and
though?
we
I mean,
won't
George,
know."
what fun is that? Who wants to pull the
And
glass off and play? That's defeating the purpose. But
right,
yeah,
and it turns out that the community self-policed pretty well. Or otherwise, there wouldn't have been the clamoring for leaderboards that there's been, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those are all good ideas. I think
Cool.
you guys are spot on.
Cale, take us to the flipper question, sir, if you don't mind.
Yeah, this is a selfish thing. 'Cause I got into a conversation with somebody on Reddit that was talking about how the flipper angle and how it's supposed to be lined up on Stern machines. And you know, I always thought it was supposed to be line up the the point of the flipper with the dimple, right?
Yeah.
Some guy came in and said King Kong and other Elwyn designs don't align with the dimple with the center axis of the bat by default. You're supposed to line on Elwyn games. You're supposed to line up. The dimple is supposed to line up with the upper edge of the flipper. Can you settle that? What's going
Yeah,
on?
no, I mean, so it's interesting you say this because just this morning on Facebook, I saw a post where the guy threw up a Deadpool and said, you know, is this correct? And I wrote a paragraph on this, but the dimple is on modern Stern games. The dimple is the center of the flipper. And this has been tried many different times. So flipper positions are designer choice. That means that certain designers like to line them up with the lane guides, where the face of the flipper is perfectly aligned with the lane guide. By the way, I don't know if everybody knows this, but the flippers are actually never perfectly aligned with the lane guide. They're actually set back from the lane guide, so you don't get the bump when the ball comes off the guide. And so they're just a hair below, and typically that dimension has to account for all the manufacturing tolerances. So when things are stacked up against you, it still works. So, but on modern Stern games, the tip of the flipper should be lined up with the dot. There are games like, and I say the flipper position is designer's choice. For example, all of my Williams games, because I was mentored by Steve Ritchie, and he always lines up the face of the flipper with the lane guide. By the way, so does Brian Eddy. All my games were like that. When I did Deadpool, I think Deadpool was the first one, maybe Batman 66. I can't remember now. I realized that I had my architecture was such that the outside shots were easier if I centered the flipper more or less to the center. If you struck a line down the center of the guide, it hit the tip of the flipper. And so I made that change. A Bond is like that. Deadpool's like that. What it does is it makes the outside shots more accessible. In the case of Bond, I had the DB5 and the Thunderball area, and they were fairly down play field. So it really helps you make those shots when the flippers are they're not quite flopped. Flopped is the old school where they're literally down from the and some designers would do that, right? So, but it's designer's choice. On Stern games, it is the center of the flipper. You'll find some 90s Williams games where they used to use a roll pin. And the roll pin was behind the flipper bat. So, here's the flipper bat, and the roll pin would come up. I'm trying to show you right behind it. So you rest the flipper on the roll pin, tighten it, and then pound, and then move the flipper up, and they'd pound the roll pin right into the play field. So it would be, and it was a through hole. So you could actually, if you ever had to do it again, you could put a drift on the backside of the play field and pop it up and use it as a gauge to set up the flipper. And you'll find that on a bunch of Williams games. Other people may have done it too. It was something from that era. It went away because sometimes the guys on the assembly line were a little aggressive. Somebody took a hammer and pounded the dented the playfield while they were pounding the roll pin and flush to the playfield. There was another thing that was done at Williams which really didn't work out, which was there was a hairline shape of the flipper at the tip in the art. It was a black line hairline shape, and you were supposed to move the flipper so that it lined up with the lines around the tip, and then tighten it. The reason it didn't work is back in those days, games were also all the playfields were silk screened, so there were registration pins on the board, and they brought the silk screens on top. But there was always some registration issue between the screens and the actual physical board. And if the art was off because it was misregistered, those locations were off.
Oh.
And so we quickly went away from that. It's a conversation we have here a lot. Like there's been a lot of conversation about, hey, should we knurl the flipper so that it indexes into a couple of positions precisely?
I think that would be really cool, actually. If there was like sort of a, you mean so it was sort of keyed so that there was only a couple places?
Keyed. It was keyed to a few locations. We've talked about it. We just haven't, it's like we can't, the engineers are a little shy with it because we use flippers in a lot of places, right? So if you do it for the bottom ones, what happens when you have an upper flipper, especially like the upper flipper in Bond, where in order to make sure that the shots were makeable, it's actually dropped. The other thing that happens is when you make that orbit, I don't want the flipper sticking out and draining you down the middle. So, right, there was for Bond, I actually printed a 3D gauge which they use. I actually published it. It's up on the site if you ever want to print your own. It's up there. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to go look at. I've not paid attention, but to my knowledge, it's always on Stern Games. It's at the tip of the flipper.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense, and that's what I always thought. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to Ralph while I'm arguing with this guy on Reddit.
Go ahead.
We jumped around a little bit. I'm going back to code just for 1 second. I think, and I have to give a shout out to my buddy Sean. He's Arcade Game Central. We kind of collaborated on this question, and he was talking about Jaws because we love Jaws. Like we play a ton of Jaws, and he's like, "Look, I think." We were both talking about how there was so much other additional value added to Jaws. Like you had the Jaws the Revenge, and then you had the Shark is Broken. And I need to give a massive shout out to Elizabeth because that was so fun and very cool. And I know it was a topper only mode, but man, it is very cool. I don't know how long it took her to do that. I don't know if that was a quick project, but it was really neat. And so him and I were wondering, like, did Jaws get all of this extra post-launch stuff because the game was successful, or like, because I guess that was, because it was really cool to get all that additional content. It felt like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a ton of value from this game.
Yeah, it's interesting. The code question. So a lot of times those things are thought of while the game is in development, but we sort of make, we talk about minimum viable product. Like what some must have that you got to have at launch. And then how much more can you add later? The question of 1.0 comes up a lot, right? And people say to me, how come, all your games aren't at 1.0 and all this kind of stuff. By the way, like hopefully in January, we're going to, there's going to be a massive games at 1.0, where there's a big code effort coming to drop like 4 titles that want to get 4 recent titles to 1.0. But, The thing about what people fail to understand is when you start the design, even if we generate a game design document, lays out what we're doing, how we're doing it, etc. What everybody forgets is that just because we did that doesn't guarantee that any of that stuff is fun. It also doesn't guarantee that any of that stuff is actually going to work. So as we develop the game, we go through big iteration cycles. I mean, let's talk about games that I reset, right? Like I reset X-Men. I wasn't having I didn't like where it was going. I didn't like the what I'm like, gotta take advantage of things like sentinels. Gotta, I want a mode. I just want to kill sentinels. So those resets really impact the development cycle, right? Those resets are the reason that games ship, and some of it's not all that, right? There are challenging licensors, right? That there are, the folks that approved The Walking Dead 12 years ago are not the folks that are approving The Walking Dead today. And so, we're fighting to get to parity, and then of course we're going to add more stuff, right? But again, I mean, the licensor said, this thing you guys did here, we would have never approved that today. So that means there are challenges there are licensing challenges that impact the development schedule. Sometimes there are like personnel things, right? Like developer on Wick left the company. Okay. And the game was, at this level. So now I got to like scramble to pull people from this project or that project. Those are our realities, right? And I can't predict them. I can't, I try to mitigate them, but there are sometimes, there are the challenges in getting code to where it gets. There's lots of different things. Like, let's talk about D&D, right? There was a ton of work done on the driver, the software driver for the Dragon, and that was iterative. That work makes the Dragon. It's not just about the rules, and yet it's software, right? It's software that has to be written that deals with the complexities of this mechanism, all the different things that we're asking it to do, and how the devices that run it are working, right? Like, we had all kinds of issues with the motors, trying to get the motors to do what we wanted them to do. And that's it, that's iterating. The thing was losing counts, it was losing steps. We couldn't get it to reset. We were like, that's just behind the scenes. Nobody's seeing it. It's got nothing to do with a rule. But there was a ton of software effort. Not only and software effort that involves many areas of the engineering effort. So you got mechanical engineers. They're worried about, how much friction does this thing have? What kind of torque does the motor have? What's the startup torque? What's the, how do we know where it is, and where are we losing steps, and the feedback elements and all this kind of stuff? Nothing to do with rules. But, and then when you run into a problem, you go, okay, this part of the development team can continue to iterate on rules and choreography and light shows and all that kind of stuff, and video content. But there's an element of the team, and often when those problems crop up, the most senior software engineers, the most senior mechanical engineers, the most senior electrical engineers, that Dragon, the top electrical engineers, the top mechanical engineers, the top software engineers in the building, working on the problem day and night. The development cycle is moving. Nobody's, nobody thinks about this when you're talking about, hey, why did it not ship at 1.0? Well, we ran into these problems that we didn't anticipate. Got to solve the problems, or the entire thing is dead in the water, right?
George, would you ever look at like beta testers, like the Xbox days? And
we have a lot of internal beta testing.
Would you external put that out?
External. So we've been, a lot of people have approached me about this. The most difficult part is that the pace of development is such that you got to be here. So, I mean, I can send stuff out to you, but like a lot of times, especially like you talk about that Dragon, right? I'm like, I can't just, the mechanical engineers are iterating daily. The 3D printers are running all freaking night. The electrical engineers, like blue wiring circuit boards and God knows what else, right? There's there's guys with oscilloscopes hooked to the game. There's like,
Sure.
it's like, so you want a beta test?
No,
gotta
I
be
was
in the building.
curious, like beta testing, maybe Star Wars, something in the earlier stages, and maybe beta testing some rules, and you sign up 100 people that have the machine
It might be
already.
feasible. It might be feasible if you had the game and we're still iterating on rules and stuff like that. It might be feasible.
Yeah.
But I think that the challenge is it's been a challenge that I don't know how to manage. A lot of people have offered their talents. I had a couple of customers that were professional. They were actually testers for video game stuff, Xbox, PlayStation stuff, but yet they're pinball guys, and they, and they've reached out to me and say, "Hey, I know a lot about test protocols. I know a lot about software test protocols and all this kind of stuff. And I'm a hardcore pinball guy, and I've got, if I had the game, could I beta test?" And I would consider it if it was feasible. I got to tell you, the last 4 or 5 months of a game development cycle, it's like you drove the car off a cliff, meaning, and you're trying to fix the parachute on the way down.
All right, Cale, take us to your next question, sir.
So George, working in the game industry is notoriously difficult. How much of your job is emotional support versus technical support?
So, I think you're asking about a subject that's dear to my heart, which is what I consider to be leadership, right? I think leadership means, for me, it means being in service of the people that you lead. And so, some people think leadership is some kind of a privilege. I think that the reality is that leadership is a service. And so you're in service of the people you lead. And so you're gonna do what it takes to lead these people to achieve the things that and it begins with what's the collective vision of what we're doing, and how do we get everybody on that page where we can agree that this is what we're trying to achieve. At the sort of at the highest level, it's like we're trying to make the best games in the business. We set the bar for our games pretty high, and we are in a lot of ways our own worst critics. You guys have no idea how hard we are on ourselves about the quality of the product, and in the and I'm not talking about necessarily the build quality. I'm talking about the quality of the games. And I think that if you analyze our games over time, I think you'll find that we're pretty damn good, right? Like you guys are still talking about stuff we did a long time ago. When you look at the lists on wherever you want, you're going to find a bunch of Stern product that, and we're proud of it, right? But to get back to your question, leadership means being in service of the people you lead, trying to get them, to the place you need to get them. And it's hard. It's like there are schedules, there are things that sometimes don't make sense. There are needs from many pieces of the organization. The marketing needs towards the end of a game are things that have to be satisfied, and yet the team has got their, they're in deep, and they're trying to get the damn thing to where it needs to be, and yet there's all these demands from outside. I need photo shoot code. I need can you go over the matrix, the feature matrix? Can you the art guys need publicity photos, or the marketing guys need publicity photos, all this stuff. There's all this noise, right? So I try to fill holes, right? And sometimes my, my job is to manage by walking around and seeing what's going on and where can I help out and how do I get you to a place. Sometimes we're all human. We all have things in our lives. We all have events that happen, and in the normal course of business, they happen in the middle of a development cycle. And yeah, sometimes I got to talk to people and motivate or try to give them perspective on the things that are being asked of us. That's a big one, right? It's like because we're in our own little world and we don't understand that, hey, the marketing guy's got marching orders too. His requirements to satisfy his job are in somewhat dependent on us. And so we can't, I understand that he, you want to kick him out of your office because you're trying to solve this problem.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't deal with your feature matrix. My dragon doesn't work. Get out. Right. So, but some of what I do is, I have to manage down or I have to manage up, right? I'm in this weird place where I have to deal with the sort of senior executives' needs in terms of the goals, directions of the studio, the requirements of shipping the game, the problems that come up. And I also have to deal with the guys that are in the trenches doing their thing. So, I'm the oldest of 7.
Wow.
My very first leadership lessons were when I was a little kid, and I'm 12 years old. My mom and dad are working, and I'm in charge of the house. So, those are my first leadership lessons. Then I'm an Eagle Scout. When I was in Scouts, they began to formalize the notion of leadership. Right? They began to teach me things about, hey, Mr. When I'm 13 years old, I'm a patrol leader, and I gotta go. We gotta get ready for a camping trip, and back in those days, you had to do the chain phone call to all the to all the parents to make sure that who's gonna drive, and you had to organize all right, we got a shopping trip, we got to do this, we got to get our food, and we got to this. So I think they began to formalize the notion of leadership, right? And then some element. The last thing is the studio I've built based on the good and the bad that I've experienced over time in all the studios I've worked in. So I worked in, I think you guys have heard me say, the studio at Williams Electronics was like 7 street gangs. And, there were two street gang bosses, and then the minor street gangs were allied to one or the other. And so, I said, wow, we were amazing. We were the best in the world. And someday I want to be the best in the world again, but I want to kind of leave behind the street gang thing. And I want to make sure that it's not an issue for me to say, hey, Brian, come in here and play Keith's game. What do you think? Or, hey, Keith, come and play Elliot's game and tell me what you think, right? So it's like we're all going to be better for these opinions. We're not, no one is trying to kill anyone. It doesn't. Sure. It just doesn't. So to your question, I don't know. A lot of it's hard to put a percentage on it. I'll tell you, my days are really busy, and the stuff I do is very diverse. So,
yeah. Well, congratulations for making it to Eagle Scout. I never got past Weeblos. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna pass the mic to Ralph now.
Yes, sir.
Right. George, this is one I think you're gonna love because I find myself in a position a lot of times where I feel like I'm a reasonable person and I take data and I formulate an opinion, but I try to, and you've even called me out before, like, Ralph, just message me if it's something like, because I think I made some really bad mistake. And you're like, just message me. I will tell you what the deal is. So I did that. I guess I was a little late on the Spike 3 cabinet, but we're not going to go down that path. But
yeah.
There's so many content creators that cover this hobby now, and that's good because I think it's more people talking about pinball is great. But what's something that you hear that you just like, let's like nip it now? Is there something like a misconception that you hear content creators repeat over and over and over again, whether it be about pinball or Stern Pinball in general, that you just feel like it's wrong and you're like, I just wish I could get everybody to understand this one thing, and then we can move on from it? Is there something that's like that you can think of?
I mean, we get accused a lot of everything. Everyone perceives that everything we do is about making things cheap, making things, like we're cheaping out. We're like shortcuts and all this kind of stuff. That is just so not the case. And yet, it's like I hear it constantly, or I hear, so, the other thing that everybody has to kind of take a step back on is, there's a vocal minority that's very vocal and about things, and what I don't like it when falsehoods are propagated, and I try to elegantly cut them off or clarify them, but I don't like this whole notion that we're the evil empire and everything that we do is like, we're like plotting and scheming and wringing our hands to like take your money and
you need theme music.
It's like I think like I always tell people, like, if you don't like our stuff, it's okay. There's people that do, and there's no obligation for you to buy the stuff we do. It's kind of like the anger that I see come through on some of these things it's kind of it always baffles me. It's like I think, oh, wow, for a hobby that's about fun, for people to be this angry about something, it's like, I'm like,
I know.
I don't get it.
My favorite thing that Kale says is they're making toys, people.
Yeah.
They're making toys.
Trying hard to entertain you.
Yeah.
And also the product development in this organization, we have an outsized influence on the direction of the company, right? We are you in some ways. We are consumers of our own product. Keith Elwin has bought my games, right? Has walked in here and going, hey, can you sign my bond? So we are the consumers of the product. We're not like purposely trying to make stuff bad that we're going to own or, so every segment of the hobby is represented on my staff. I have tournament players that are all about tournaments. I have collectors that are all about collecting. I have modders that are all about modding. I have casual players that are all about casual. So I don't know what to tell you. We don't pay the same money you do, but we still pay for them, and we still buy them, and we still own them, and we still enjoy them. And so I don't know, it's
my favorite incident where you were correcting the public was on Facebook when a guy was talking about King Kong and how the spider was stopping his pinball.
Yeah.
And your response was, no, the spider has no mass.
Right. But it's like, but I hear I'm a broken record with the, hey, the pinball, the actual ball is the hardest thing on a pinball playfield. Mm-hmm. So the softer material will always yield. A piece of wood is not as hard as a piece of hardened steel. So yes, you're gonna dimple the wood. It's
Mhm.
just kind of like, I don't know how else to say it. It's like there are things, right? Like when you compare the hard coats of the 90s against the hard coats of today, they're substantially different. We, at some point in time, we decided that everything had to be super glossy and super pretty and very thick. And all that's going to do is show you the dimples all the more, right? It's like a magnifying glass. You put 2 layers of super shiny hard coat on this thing. What do you think's going to happen? So in the 90s, those things were, they barely had one hard coat. They it was a functional thing, and intended to make games last on location. Have you ever seen, I'm sure you guys have seen the pre-hard coat pin playfields out there,
Oh, for sure.
and worn down to the wood, right? I mean, Cale, you guys probably have a bunch of those at your
Yep.
place, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know.
All right,
It's like-
quick
Well, I
hiring
commend
question.
you for
Oh, go
having
ahead.
to I commend you for having to deal with that sometimes, because it does kind of feed. I just one quick thing, comment on that last question, because it does kind of fit, I think, with what Cale was saying about like the emotional support versus tech support. Do you encourage the guys to, when they're like maybe after a game launch, to sort of try to, because I can't remember if it was like Steve Jobs that used to be all about you, Cale, you have something like a signal to noise ratio, like making sure that you're not letting the noise overcome everything else. So do you sometimes have to provide a little bit of the guys like?
So I'll tell you that
yeah.
My guidance is always, you can't read that stuff. Like I
Yeah.
always tell guys, I say, you can't lurk up there. People say really mean things that they don't know you. They don't know how much passion and care you put into this, but they're gonna say horrible things. I learned very early on, right? The world used to be different. There was, when the business was entirely almost 100% commercial operations. The pinball community was really small, and it was a rec.games.pinball, was essentially the of the day pin side, but it was tiny. And I learned early on, and I think it was Pat Lawler told me. Pat Lawler said, he says, we never go up there. The questions only go to Ask Uncle Willie. And the next thing he said to me is, and you can't read that stuff. And I'm like, why? And he goes, well, because it's emotionally bad for your health, man. It's like, people don't know you, and they're gonna say, that was the era I came up in. And when I arrived at Stern Pinball to work full time, the world was a little bit different. It wasn't even at the level that it is now, but it was beginning to start, right? And so I think when I did Avengers or something, there was a guy on Pinside that said, I want to punch George
Jeez.
Gomez and Lonnie Ropp in the face, right? And
That's
and
bad.
I
when
was
you're
like, I was like, what is this, man? What the hell? What is this?
Yeah.
Right? That's like like the world. And so it hasn't gotten easier, but what I learned, what that episode began to teach me, that for my own mental health, I'm not going up there. I'm not reading that shit. I'm not dealing with it. Right. I do, whenever possible. I'm a member of all those Facebook groups and stuff. And when I see people having trouble, if I have the time, I will take the time to try to help out. I won't get into, philosophical discussions about how we cheaped out or anything like that. I won't do that. If you're having trouble with your game, or, you need clarity, like I wrote a paragraph on this flipper angle thing this morning on Facebook, right? And I don't know, there's always all these experts out there, and I want to reach through the screen and go, and how many pinball machines have you designed? Right? So it's like, I don't, but it's like, kind of like, look, I'm a professional designer. I have a bachelor's degree in industrial design. I started my career at Midway Games. I have I was a toy inventor at the most successful toy invention firm in the world. I led an Xbox and PlayStation team for 9 years of my career. I designed pinball machines at Williams Electronics. So I have swum with the sharks at all of these places, and I've learned a bunch of things along the way, which is the only thing that really allows me to do the job I do today, right? Is all of those experiences inform how you manage the studio, what you do, how you design things, how you advise people about the things that they're designing. And that's all I can offer. I can't get into, I had a guy when in the WIC controversy, I had a guy that was literally calling me a liar. And he, because he had seen some WIC action toy that had guns, and I was going, yeah, I know, but we're in a different product category, and whatever. And he's calling me a liar. It's like, I can, how long can I engage with that? Right? I can't.
Yeah.
I have to say, think what you think, and
do you tell
move away.
Designers not to engage? Do you tell them? And when they do engage, what do you say to them?
I try to tell them, yeah, I mean, they do engage, right? And sometimes they come in here and they, they're distraught by what they read. And and all I can say is, I told you not to do that. I can say, it's bad for you. Try not to do that.
Cale says it to us all the time. And it's such a smaller scale of the crap that we get. But somebody told Ralph he had an ugly face, and I thought that hurt feelings.
They did say that.
You see what I'm saying? But he walks around, he thinks he has an ugly face all day.
But that one I was scratching my head, George, because I'm like, I can't change my face though. So like, what can I say back to this? I didn't even know how to respond. And Cale is so good at bringing us down and going, guys. Like,
your face is already at 1.0. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing.
So
very
it's done.
Good, Cale. Very good.
I was like, look, my face is at minimal viable product right now, but when it gets to 1.0, it's going to be fucking great.
By the way, nothing ever, like, we are still questioned. We've completed so many games, right? We've taken so many games to 1.0 and beyond and beyond. And yet we're still questioned about the notion of this, right? And it's like we try to ship as complete as we can. There is something that's happened in the last few years where with Insider Connected, we actually get to see how people are playing the games and what they're doing and what they're getting to and what scores they're getting at. And it does help us. And plus listening to you guys, right? So listening to you guys talk about what you like and don't like actually affects how we finish the games. So I don't, I mean, I think that the other thing that, to your question back about the Jaws game and the content in the Jaws game, every game's different. And some games have a lot of content, some games have less. To some extent, the design teams make choices about what's in their game. I have seen people, I mean, I saw a guy post, the game went out at 8.5 or something. I saw the guy saying, the code is still early. What exactly do you expect is going to happen between 8.5 and 1.0? The code is still early. I don't, the community sometimes invents features that we should have that we never dreamt of. Like they were like, okay, as a suggestion, something we might do, that's absolutely valid. As an expectation of what we were going to do, not so much, right? Because, hey, this wasn't in the game design. You guys invented it. So,
wow.
So yeah, but we always finish them. Do I want them all to be closer to done when they ship? Yes, I do. And we're trying very hard to do it. As I said, the things you always have to keep in mind, the scope of a game changes. Sometimes the licensor has opinions. Sometimes we have technical issues, the dragon description. And, sometimes things happen. Guys leave the company, right? Events that we didn't plan that impact the development cycle.
I think your question about people leaving the company is a good segue into Jamie, something you wanted to ask about, right?
Yeah, so I work as a tech recruiter, George, and
Mhm.
I work with NDAs and non-competes on the daily.
Mhm.
And I don't, I know your industry is a lot smaller than the tech or the oil and gas industries that I
Yeah.
supply people to, but is Stern protecting their intellectual property through non-competes and
100%. Yeah. So, not only non-competes, but NDAs get
NDA?
signed.
Right. Okay.
And also, we patent lots of stuff. So, and when we do interactions with licensors and things like that, there's always NDAs in place. A lot of times the reasons we can't talk about, there's a lot of conversation about, why don't you guys just tell us what you're doing? Well, my deal with the company, or our deal, the company's deals with the licensor don't allow us to tell you what we're doing. So I don't, it's like, yeah, would love to tell you what the next 3 games are, but there's contracts in place, and so there's lots of things. When somebody steals IP, a lot of our, like a aftermarket guy making Deadpool toppers or whatever with our art, sometimes our contracts actually stipulate that we have to report this to the licensor. So the licensing thing, the legality of it, of those scenarios is complex.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like when we say you shouldn't do that, like okay, yes, you're stealing our IP. If you put a Stern logo on it, you're stealing our IP, and we're going to have something to say about it. But I don't know, you want to mess with Disney lawyers, really? It's like,
No.
I don't know, really. So, and they, they'll tell you that, yeah, I don't know, it's like I think it's a risk you take that where okay, I'm small fry, they're not going to bother me, maybe, and maybe you're right, maybe you can get away with it. But there, the IP thing is very, we're a real company. The companies we deal with are also real companies. Yes, all that stuff there's NDAs, there's contracts, there's stipulations on when stuff, and what the people don't realize is that how things are, like the licensor has 100% right of approval. So that means that all marketing materials, all content for the games in every way, shape, or form, the game design, the content on screen, the speech calls, the rule progression, the what you're going to call modes, all of this stuff has to go through approvals. Every piece of art, plastics, decals, you name it, the sculpts, everything is approved, has to be approved. It's a big process. It's a real pain in the butt. Stuff gets kicked out all the time. It gets sent back. It needs to be changed. The scale of this character relative to that character, the likeness prompt that in movie properties, a lot of times the actors have prominence contracts with the IP. So everybody beat us up about the Game of Thrones people all being the same size. Yeah, I know. Nothing I could do. Nothing I could do. No actor could be highlighted differently than another actor, right? So, I mean, this is the stuff everybody forgets about, and also everybody assumes that oh, why didn't they get this song? Well, yeah, did you think we were unaware of that song? We were, we just couldn't get it. It was like they said, no, you can't have this song.
Well, I'm sure there's times too, right, George, where like access to that song would be so expensive that it wouldn't even make the product viable
That's true.
anymore, right?
And
Does that happen?
licenses also, right? Licenses also. Like there's a limit to what we will pay for a license, because at the end of the day, we still it figures into the cost equation for the game. So it's kind of like yes, I want this license, but if it's too expensive, I can't take it. I won't, it just doesn't make sense. Now there are companies in the world that exist only to have the jobs they have, or maybe can afford it, and I don't know. I don't know the business mechanics of the other companies in the space. I only know mine. And so I can only tell you that there are limits to what we will pay for something. There are limits to we have to make the product viable to the to the business targets of the company.
All right, Cal, why don't you go on to your question, because we want to be respectful of your time. But so far it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
I got all night, fellas, so you ask away. I
Oh.
blocked
Okay.
it out for you.
Oh, that's
so-
bad news. You don't want to hear
Yeah.
that from you three.
Yeah, don't tell us that.
Don't tell us that.
I have a little excerpt from a book I read about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs often told the story of learning craftsmanship from his father while building a fence.
Mhm.
When Steve only painted the visible front of the fence, his dad insisted the back must be just as beautiful because you will know. A lesson that taught Jobs quality matters everywhere, even unseen, influencing Apple's meticulous internal design and craftsmanship.
Mhm.
This principle meant creating products with care, even components customers never see, to ensure true excellence and personal integrity in their work. That being said, was not finishing the edges on the new cabinets a design decision or a financial decision? Was it an oversight?
So there's only one there's only one unfinished edge, the one in the front panel, and I think in the future I will finish it. I think you'll see a generation of cabinets where that edge will be finished. And it's really not about that. It's the fact that the edge banding will protect the corners or the edges of that panel when you rest a playfield on it. The only other unfinished edge is really one in which you have to take you have to take the armor off, and then you'll see it. That one, what's interesting about that one is that I actually considered finishing it, but the edge banding machine cannot handle that shape. So the cuts in that shape that I had to create, the edge banding machine can't do. But I actually talked about it.
Don't you think a little black spray paint would have solved the whole edge gate problem?
Well, on that front panel, maybe.
Yeah, like when you take the lock bar off.
But
Yeah.
maybe the difference is that you have a process right now where that panel is I mean, as it comes off the machine, it's basically done. There are no secondary operations. And so it's like that would probably be the only panel that gets painted. Now you'll notice that I went through the trouble of creating little molded plastic black caps in the pockets that hold the side armor, and also there's a molded plastic black cap that trims the hole that the hinge bolt goes into, right? So and also when you look at one of those cabinets, notice that the edge under the cabinet is finished, right? There's a piece of edge molding under the cabinet. There's pieces of edge molding in the back. So the absolute only edge that's exposed to the outside is this front one, and it probably will be in the future iteration of the cabinet.
Interesting.
So talk about the Steve Jobs thing. This is very interesting. So there's a Steve Jobs line that also came from that book that I've read that book, by the way. That says real artists ship, and that speaks to the notion that you are business, and yes, there's artistry in what we do, but you're a business. That means that the experience at Next before he went back to Apple was an experience in which some of that internal, the screws, custom screws designed to look a certain way inside the machine, really sidelined that product, right? That attention to detail internal to that particular product really was, one of the things that extended those development cycles and extended the cost of the machine. And there's, whether it's I think it's one of the books basically goes into this. So I think we try to be practical, right? We hold costs where we can. Some years ago, I think I was talking to John Papaduke, right, and he wanted all of the stuff underneath the playfield to be stainless steel. And I was like, okay, that's great, man, but you're going to add a bunch of money to stuff that probably doesn't need to be stainless steel. And I, it was strictly an aesthetic thing. It wasn't any kind of like a functional, it's gonna corrode or it's not strong enough or anything like that. It was strictly an aesthetic thing. So I'll draw the line and stuff like that. But if you look at one of those new cabinets and ask me why I finished the underside edge, because it's not, you're never going to see it. You'll see it when you take it out of the cabinet. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna pass it on to Ralph.
Yeah,
Ralph, ask your BOM. I think that's a good question.
yeah. Well, when I wrote this, I wrote it a couple of times because I was like, I don't know how you're going to answer it, George. Not that that was playing into how I was going to write it, but I want to be like kind of maybe a little bit more clear than how I wrote it. So I'm going to improvise a little bit.
Sure.
So I know that, like any company, I work for a tech company. We have a bill of materials when we build something, and usually we have maybe a little flexibility one way or the other, but for us to make the margins we need to make and everything while still creating a quality product, we have to stay within some confines. And I was just curious, maybe this is a wild question, but if like suddenly you had zero bill of materials restrictions, has there been something over time that you've had to remove from a pinball machine that because it costs so much, but if you did have zero restrictions, you might bring it back? But it's prohibitive now because if you put it in, you would like blow the whole thing apart. Just because it would be way out of the scope to make the margins and things you guys need to make.
Yeah, I mean, the only things I can think of are things like possibly aesthetic things. I think that we so our bills of material are not like cast in concrete. They're flexible to some extent. There are targets that the teams work to, and those targets are and we have so the cost of a game is not strictly the bills of material, even though that's what everybody in the community likes to talk about. The cost of the game is also, the development cycle, the tooling costs, and essentially the labor to manufacture the game, right? So those are and the cost of licenses, the cost of music, the cost, all those things, all those peripheral things, all add up to equal the cost of the game, right? So my tooling budgets, for example. If a designer isn't using his entire tooling budget, that gives me flexibility to spend that money on the next guy's game that has more stuff that needs more tooling. So at the end of the year, I just kind of need to be balanced to what I'm allocated in terms of that budget. And it's a natural occurrence. It's very seldom that everybody wants to tool that, has like maxed out tooling budgets. It just doesn't happen. So, but the in terms of the bill of materials cost or the targets, we have flexibility to some extent, right? Like I have these discussions with the teams all the time. So the development cycle has got some elements of discipline. There are gates along the way. And these review gates, the team presents the status of their project. In the beginning, they're concept gates. This is what we think we want to do with the game. And, it's all lots of, PowerPoints with images and concept drawings and descriptions of what's going to happen and how it's going to happen and what music they're going to use and what sculpts they need and all this kind of stuff, right? And as the game development cycle progresses, things become more real and people start seeing more stuff. Eventually you're looking at CAD, and then you're looking at, Whitewoods, and then you're flipping the game, and then you're all the way along. All these things happen. Well, the conversation is all of those costs and things are talked about at every one of those gates. They get talked about, they get reviewed. Hey, we think we're going to be like really high because of this. And what do you guys think? And stuff gets evaluated. So my mantra to them has always been, like if it's, we keep all the things that are vital to the game. Anything that like is, how badly is it going to hurt you? You're $300 over cost. This thing costs $250 of that. Is it vital to the game? If it's not vital to the game, and sometimes it's maybe it's not specific enough that you can't use it on the next one. That's happened too, right? Like, okay, you know what? You didn't really need that on this one, but that's a pretty cool thing that you did. So maybe you use it on the next one. But there's always some flexibility. My conversations with senior management a lot of times are, hey, can you imagine the game without this thing? Can't really take it out. And remember, I said what I said before. I'm the subject matter expert. So they're not, they're going to say to me, can you find money anywhere else? Or, okay, there's hard conversations about how to get the product, to the end state and not compromise what the product is.
I know we're not going to talk about future releases. We're not going to ask you to give us the name of the next 4 Stern releases. Okay, right. We're not doing that.
Okay.
But there's a rumor out there. We're not going to, okay, on a particular title that my children are obsessed with. And they're adult children. They're 26 and 22. And they play the hell out of this game called Fallout. And they just wanted me to tell you, because I told them I was interviewing you, that, well, I need to thank you because I guess I got to start saving now. Is the answer. Because the youngest is home for Christmas and he just started Fallout 4 on my Xbox, and he's getting me a ton of achievements, so that's great.
You guys are tough. I love you.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Confirm it. I'm just telling you, it's going to cost me a lot of money, and I hope it's great.
No comment.
Okay.
Yeah, George, how the heck does this stuff? This brings up a good question. I know there's sometimes holes in the ship. Where are these people at Stern that kind of like, where are
these?
I try to ask
the leaks.
Yeah, I try to ask Elizabeth Gieske stuff. You have her so well trained. She's like, Ralph, that sounds great. Next, please.
It's better than that. Like, Mike Vinicore stays at my house for a week, and you can't. He has never.
He's a sphinx, right? Yeah. He's a sphinx, man. You're not getting anything out of Mike.
You're not getting.
Like, he's gonna, yeah. No, I think. My opinion. My opinion is that, the leaks come. It's some combination of. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the dealer network, maybe it's, because they get some previews, they get some preview conversations. And that's just my opinion. I can't actually point to anybody and say that's the leak. I think that for a long time, I thought it was Gary. I think Gary's the leak. I think it's like, Gary's talking to somebody, he's like, yeah, I'm working on this. I don't know. I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't believe it's, and I don't believe it's anyone internally on my staff anyway. I don't know. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of stuff, and we I what can I tell you? It's like I we talk about friction, the friction of day to day, the emotional friction of the community's opinions on the guys doing the work, and I think that one of the things that I've always preached is we keep our eye on our ball, and that's what we have to worry about.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you got to have the confidence to say, we know what we're doing, and we know what's good for us, and it's okay to listen. It's absolutely necessary to listen, but at the end of the day, most of the we get paid to be forward looking. The community is mostly backward looking, and what do I mean by that? This is not uncommon in any product, right? People that buy cars, the folks that design cars are forward looking, and the people that own and buy cars, they so what happens is that people want you to they reference what they know when they talk about what they want. So it's a data point. It's not, they can't envision that. They're not paid to envision the future. My designers are paid to envision the future. So I think that I say we keep our eye on our ball. We listen. We take in all the stuff. It's really important to listen, but it's also important to have filters that say, okay, I think I heard that, but I think we should do this. Or so I mean, I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
but...
I mean, it does. I mean, I think there's a lot of I've been in lots of different hobbies, and it's interesting. Like there are people that from other hobbies I've been in where they'll literally pay to look at like Long Beach port manifests, and they'll see and what's coming in on a crate, and they'll go, oh, there's a bunch of like, I'm just making it up, like some toy is coming in, and like that's weird, and we heard this rumor that. And
there are some licensors publish who the IP holders are. So for a while there, we figured out that somebody figured out that they can go to these websites, and the licensors actually list
who they're working with.
Yeah, who they're working with, and so you go, oh, that's where they saw it, and
that damn
so
Jason Knapp. Man, that guy.
So speaking of Jason Knapp, not to talk about him directly, but we're all friends with him, and he works in a field I used to work at. Like I used to do competitive intelligence for the company I work for, and so I'd have all these tools where I could see things like, and I think he uses these, so I could see like the Stern website accidentally published something and pulled it down, and for that split moment, I see that thing. Yeah. And I don't use those tools anymore, but because they were company tools, and I'm not in that department.
I forgot that's what he did. He's a great guy. I like him a lot. He's very even keeled. Is the best way to describe it. And so I think that I like I have no issues with somebody legitimately sleuthing what we're doing. No issues at all. I think it's concerning if if somebody publishes a picture and it clearly came from inside. Back when we were working on Deadpools, that's exactly what happened, and so that is disturbing to me. Right? That's like, okay, where did that's an internal photo. That's like that had to have that had to be like somebody in here with a belt cam or something. There were photos floating around when we did the first when we moved to Spike 2, the early Spike 2 back boxes. Somebody had taken And it was clearly like a spy cam photo, because of the position of the photo relative to where the back boxes were and everything. And so that stuff's disturbing to me. The the kind of the slate of games that are coming and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, yeah, there's somebody, Gary's talking to somebody or something. I don't know.
Poor Gary.
Right.
But that stuff could be damaging with your relationship with the license holder if it was like
absolutely
that, right?
Yeah, no, that's the danger of it. The danger of it, and there have been a couple of times when licensors have called us out on it. That has happened. Right.
So you're not going to go to TPF and just sit at a panel and tell people what's coming?
I was in a panel I was in the audience at TPF. My friend Chris Ranchi disclosed Deadpool. And he didn't mean to. I think, it was like it was in his head, and he just kind of like, it just spilled out of his. It just spilled out in conversation. He's up in the panel. I'm in the back of the room going, "What did you just say?" I said, "Dude, do you realize you just disclosed Deadpool?" I did.
Oh wow!
Do we have any more questions, boys, or are we?
I thought there was. I know I had one more, but I think Kayla, you had one, right? I thought.
Yeah. When we were playing The Walking Dead remastered over at Ralph's house, I noticed there are some new rollover switches I've never seen before that replace the star rollovers.
Yep.
Are we going to see those more often? What's the deal?
Yep. It's a better design. Doesn't have some of the the original rollover, the star rollovers, that design was actually it was a great evolution of the traditional star rollover. The traditional star rollovers have always been problematic in the business from the day that we started using hard coats. The original ones had a ring that fit into the playfield, and a plastic ring, very similar to an insert, except that it was open in the center for you to build the switch into it. And it's always been a challenge to have any kind of opening in the playfield that you have to keep hard coat out of. So whenever we have openings in the playfield, there's a lot of design thought that goes into what happens when the hard coat gets in there. You always want to avoid situations where you have a secondary operation to clean stuff out. That's that's more work. It's a thing that you have to control with a fixture. It's just, really a complexity. So we went away from the traditional old designs to that new rollover design, and it has some really cool features, like it was, you could level it to the playfield. It had adjustments, so you could level it to the playfield. It was self-contained. It had tricolor LEDs. It had all the things. It was connectorized, so there was no soldering at the device. It had all the things that we thought were great. The one thing it didn't have was there were a lot of situations where if the ball was just slightly off center of the thing wouldn't register. So now you got a rollover switch that, while it serves all these things, and by the way, this is not new to rollover switches. The old ones did it too. But so the switch that you're talking about is designed such that no matter where you are on the edge of the switch or the center of the switch or whatever, it stands a much better chance of actually triggering the switch.
So is that something you guys designed, or is that an off the shelf?
No, it's something we designed. Yeah. And actually it was, that switch was driven by Jack.
Cool.
Jack pushed for it, and Jack's engineer, Kevin Kalujic, worked on it with him, and Kevin engineered it. And it's really cool. As a matter of fact, when we get to talking about the new game, which we can't talk too much about, but I had a situation where when I started working on the game, Jack had a string of these things in the game. And there was a shot that wasn't quite working. And I'm fighting with this shot. just fighting with it. And one day I went through all these iterations, and one day I took all the switches off because I thought, I think these switches are having an effect. And I taped over the holes with blue tape, blue painter's tape, taped over them, and it didn't fix it. And then I took ramp flap material and put it over the holes, and that didn't fix it. And one day I took my phone and I did slow motion video on the thing, and yes, the switches were affecting the shot, and so were the holes. The tape didn't fix the hole, and the ramp flaps didn't fix the hole. And so I walked over to Jack and said, guess what? We're taking all those switches out. But they were laid out in such a way that they worked great when the ball was cross play field and it was doing this. But when you were making this shot, they were lofting the ball.
Mm. So I imagine if you remove those, they would be replaced with optos.
No, we didn't. It was one of these features where it wasn't necessary to it was like one of those, like, when the ball is randomly moving from the left side of the plate to the right side of the plate, it's going to make the switch. And when it wasn't like a thing you could, I suppose you could shoot for it, but it was a very peripheral feature. And so what we learned was, hey, if you put those things in front of a shot, you're going to get some lofting. If you put them like we have them on Walking Dead, where you're rolling down and over them, they work just great. But and I'll tell you that the old Star rollovers, they didn't behave a lot differently. They still lofted the shot. So yeah. But it is a really cool switch for situations where, like in Walking Dead, where you're like, it's you're not shooting directly over it. You're basically, like draining over it. Then they work fantastic.
Right.
So, George, I had a question about LEs, because I can't help myself. I always feel like with things I buy, I always look at the high end version of it. And even though I have local people that can powder coat things and do all that, there's a convenience thing for me, which I think a lot of people forget about when they think about LEs, that there's a lot of things you put on there that, sure, you'll sell as accessories, but I don't have to install them. Even though I like to tinker and do that, there's kind of a fun factor to customizing your pinball machine. I think that's why you guys probably are really successful with accessories, because it's fun to see your game kind of turn into what you want it to look like. But, and maybe you've answered this before, so I apologize if it's repetitive, but is there like something that you guys are thinking about, like as a next step of the LE progression, to say maybe bring something that's really unique to the LE, because it is the top end. Yeah. There's quite a delta between premium and LE. So just, I'd love to, as much as you can share, I'd love to know like what you guys are thinking around LEs.
So I think I said this on Gary's on Carrie's podcast also. We've been thinking a lot about how to add value to the LE, and also how to make the LE even more special, right? So we've added a bunch of things, which what's interesting is we've not gotten credit for adding them. So we invented we added speaker expression lights, and it went unnoticed. We've added expression lights to the cabinet, and somewhat went unnoticed. I think that we have had discussions about special modes and things like that. We have had discussion about giveaways and peripheral things to the theme that could maybe come with it. The code discussion is an interesting one, and in which we'd be very interested in feedback, because when you look at the toppers, right, the whole topper code thing it's a thing you can blame me for, right? Because at one point in time, I had a development team that wasn't thinking, it was like, it's just another bunch of lights, and this is in the beginning of topper life, right? And so I said, well, why don't we make it significant to the game? So why don't we add something that's significant to the game that, something that tracks your score, something that affects your score, a new mode, something, etc. And that sparked them, and they, we started down that road. But it's I also hear from people that they don't want us to do a special mode for toppers, that they think that, and from my perspective, it's an additional thing. It's not like pivotal to the game. And if it does add value to the notion of the topper. So I don't know where to go with it. If we did we did special modes for LEs, which by the way, we've done a couple of times. I think Tron, has end of line, right?
Mhm.
On the LE. I think, would that, I mean, would people want that? Right. So, there's always going to be the there's another thing about all of this. We talk about additional modes, we talk about additional software and stuff. There's a development cost to these things that nobody thinks about. Nobody talks about it. We put X amount of dollars into a couple of engineers, some artists, sound people to do these extra things. And so that at some point in time that has to be paid for in some way. So I don't know. I'm very open to suggestions, discussion, etc. on how to make LEs more valuable, how to make them significant, more significant, etc. I think that there's I'll tell you something else about LEs, and that is we just came out of a market, a COVID fueled market where there's scarcity of things, and it didn't matter if it was Porsches or pinball machines. The fact that the factories could produce limited numbers because of the challenges of producing and the increased demand because people had nothing to do when they wanted this entertainment or whatever. It created scenarios where the market all of those products were artificially inflated in price. And so things literally gained value overnight, and it was worth more the day after you bought it. And so that's not reality in almost any market in normal times. So my feeling is I think that an LE 10 years from now will absolutely be worth more than it is today. I don't think it's realistic to say that your LE is going to be worth more next week than it is the week you bought it. I think that we all buy. There's an element of exclusivity that you pay for, and that exclusivity, I think it takes time for it to be significant. If you look at, it's like the notion that the thing is made in limited quantities. If the amount of people clamoring for it is greater than the quantity made, that is going to increase the value of the thing. I mean, I don't, I didn't invent these economics. They're the economics of the world.
Yeah.
And
Do you think so?
I don't want, I think we're very concerned about trying to make sure that the products are in demand, that we don't overbuild, that we, that the price reflects the value, all those kinds of things. We're not tone deaf to it, for sure.
Have there been any discussions about, because I kind of view the LE maybe a little different, because to me, I think there's definitely a part of the hobby where there's people that, to your point, want the thing that they know there's not going to be that many of, because now that's unique. But you mentioned the market and how it's different now coming out of COVID. Do you think maybe, has there been any thought of maybe making less of them to make them a little bit more rare?
And actually we have, right? I think with X-Men,
Yeah,
we didn't, I think we purposely reduced the number. I think the last few games we've reduced the numbers. I think we're one of the things that happens is our sales department polls dealers and distributors and said, what do you think? And so a lot of the opinions are opinions based on, what they might, what they imagine they can sell. I don't, I think that if you, and that's why, you talk about the title leaks and stuff like that, people's, sometimes those guys know ahead of time, this is what's coming. And the conversation that a sales team might have with them is what you're feeling about this. And then they'll make some recommendation and we look at it and say, okay, that works. There's, you also have to imagine that sometimes, there are economies of scale, right? So the smaller the run not every part is affected, but some parts are affected, right? Now there's, we have a lot of the fact that the play fields have been common, that helps, right? Premium play fields and LE play fields for all intents and purposes the same. So you're looking at essentially peripherals of, aesthetics and things like that. But, like we've done those polycarbonate decals. I first did them on Batman 66 SLEs. And we did them again on, I think, Blood Red Kiss, right? If you've ever seen one of those up close, that's a serious step up. It's also a serious cost up. Mm-hmm. So, but you may see those again, I don't know. We're talking about it. We're looking at it. We're listening to people. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think my only additional piece of feedback there is, and this is just my personal opinion, and I think I have a couple friends that share it, and getting back to the I want something unique, it does bother me a little bit that I have a buddy who basically made his Kong look like my Kong. And I'm like, no, I don't want your Kong to look like my Kong. Right. I have the special Kong. So, yeah. So that kind of stuff,
but he made it like he couldn't buy the unique stuff, like the back glass and stuff like that. You can't buy that unless you cheat, unless you figure out a way to cheat us. But I mean, it's like
George, this guy, he knows some shady people. So he's a little bit unique in that way, but he knows some people. But I'm not really joking about that. But no, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah. It's cool that you can do the accessories, but
look, I'll tell you that the sales guys have been your biggest defenders in that area.
Okay.
Right. Those guys are like when the development cycle's happening, they're all over us on, that's too similar. That's got to be different. You got to have the mirror. I've had a situation with the mirror where I've actually seen some out, I think some pieces of art that haven't lent themselves to the mirror. And I think we're really forcing the art into the mirror. And I think that, like, for a long time I said, hey, I want the right to make the choice. That, as the guy running product development, I want the right to make the choice. Some pieces of art, I mean, I think it's actually inferior to the non-mirror, but everybody's like, no, it's got to be the mirror. Okay, the mirror. Oh, all right, okay. So we've been standing on our heads to make the mirrors amazing on everything, regardless of the art. But
the mirror looks pretty good, George. When we went to go see Kong and you didn't have I don't know why, I think the LE wasn't ready yet or something, but you came in with it. We were all like, oh yeah, like it looks really good. Like it looks very sharp on the Kong.
I think we're always learning, right? The Star Wars backglass, it's interesting is we did those stripes because it harkened back to the blister packs that we remember from the Kenner toys, right? And I think in retrospect, while we did it on the home edition boxes, and that's where we first did it. And we liked it so much on those home edition boxes that we said, oh, let's do the back glasses like that. And I think that hurt us. And I think a lot of people have come to me and said, is the back glass smaller? I was like, no, the back glass isn't smaller.
Oh,
it's the
that's
same
interesting.
size. But I think, and those paintings, the other thing about those paintings is, those paintings are spectacular. The problem is, and I don't know if you were here, Ralph, when we debuted it, right? Like when we did the influencer event and we debuted it, and we threw those images on in the slide in the room, and the room went, oh, they loved them, right? But then when you saw them in the actual games, people said, oh, that looks smaller. So I think the stripes were probably a mistake on the back glass. I think we probably should have gone full
That's
on
interesting.
with that art. But that's a hindsight thing. We when we looked at it, we're like, yeah, I love those those Kenner blister packs, right?
Yeah, I didn't make it to the influencer thing that time. I actually was coming back from New York, and I randomly texted Zach, and I was like, hey, can I just come through and see it? And I got
Right.
put in a room. I got the same experience, but I got put in the room with a bunch of like people getting a repair training. So I didn't have the same experience because when you guys showed it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And they were just kind of...
when we showed it, the room went crazy. They loved it. And they were like, oh my God, those are fantastic. It was like, okay. And then they got on the street and everybody was like, oh, they made that back glass smaller.
That's funny because I didn't really think that, but that is interesting. I can see where someone might. Yeah, I can see where someone
it's
might.
An optical illusion.
You can't please everybody, right?
Yeah, no, never.
Stripes are slimming, boys.
Yeah, right.
Okay, I'm a little bigger than those two. Okay, I'm telling you, stripes are slimming.
I want to get into the growing pains of any company. The tone of any company is set by its leadership, and over the past couple of years, we've seen the tone and mood at Stern shift dramatically and become much more negative. We've seen many employees and departments, publicly or semi-publicly, I've on some discords where some employees are, they complain about the new Stern, and sales don't seem to reflect positive change. What is your opinion about this direction? Can you tell us some benefits of new leadership that has benefited?
I know exactly. You're referring to a specific situation, and I think that I mean, we have a policy that employees shouldn't sort of post publicly because you say, well, like the company has spokespeople and they should. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and if that person's opinion may not be somebody else's opinion, and so I think that when you talk about growing pains, I don't know that the growing pains that I see are the growing pains that you imagine, right? Like the growing pains that I see are we're scaling into new markets, and there's a need to address and maintain those that's different than things were when we were smaller. I think that we have higher production capacity. There are big challenges with making sure that that production animal has to be fed, and so you got to get your procurement, you got to get your parts here on time, you got to deal with tariffs and costs and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of growing pains that I see. I don't. You talk about new leadership. I think we've made some great selections. I'm personally very happy that Seth is the guy that got picked for that seat, because I can work with him very well, and I think that he understands, and I think that at the end of the day, as I said before, I'm the subject matter expert, and when it comes to the things that matter relative to the games, he's going to defer to my opinion. So I don't worry about stuff like that. He's very good at things I'm not very good at, right? Mm-hmm. So he understands business really well. He understands the modern environment of marketing and basically promoting the company much better than I do. So I think that, he's got he's got a very global perspective on what the business should be worldwide, and there's a lot of initiatives to help some of those foreign markets emerge and grow. And so I think that there's a lot of people in leadership, that new people in leadership positions, that where they just haven't been here long enough for anyone to say, is he effective? Is he not effective? But I can tell you that we go through some pretty rigorous screening processes when we bring people in, and we try to pick people that, A, we think will get it, B, we think we can work with, and C, that bring something to the skill set, with their skill set, that we don't have, or that we think could elevate the business. So we have new folks, Matthew Geyer in marketing. He hasn't been here very long, but he's got expertise that he's got a lot of expertise that we didn't really have. We have Tom Helma running the parts and merch area, also very talented, and he brings expertise that we didn't have. So I think, I'm excited about the future of the company. I don't, I don't like, I'm 70 years old. I don't have to be here. I don't have to come to work every day and do this. I do it because I want to do it. And I'm also mature enough, and I know myself enough, that I'm not going to put myself in situations that don't make me happy. Don't, so I think the company is a better company than it's ever been, actually. I think from the breadth of talent that I have on my staff, and these new people that are being added to complement areas of the company that we didn't have people in, because we didn't need people in, right? We didn't need we didn't need people of Tom Helma's caliber in running that area, but that area is a piece of business that, with huge growth potential, that's making that accessories and merch, right, and parts. That's an area of the company that has huge potential and needs somebody with some business sense and experience in similar situations, which he brings, to run it and manage it. And so, I don't, like I said, I don't have to be here. I'd be, if the day I'm unhappy is not a day I'm going to, I mean, I don't take that too literally, because I'm not a guy that walks away from situations that are not perfect. I'm a guy that works to fix those situations to my liking. So I'm,
so on that point, we love the pinball public loves seeing you, and it seems like you've had to do damage control in two major situations, the gun gate, right?
Yeah.
And thank you so much for flying us out and feeding us pizza for that thing. And then now Edge Gate. Do you wish that Stern had a dedicated spokesperson that could educate and talk to the audience?
No, I'll tell you that I'm happy to do it, because I'm so close to it. I'm happy to do it. I'll tell you that I want Jack to be successful in his role, and his role is in some ways similar, in that he's about informing, and having a connection to the community, and a two-way communications thing, right? Ask Jack. All those kinds of things are all about, let's hear what you're saying. Let's try to respond to your questions, to all that kind of stuff. So that's a very necessary thing. in my role, Chief Creative Officer for Stern Pinball, right? That I'm going to get the hard stuff, right? I'm going to get the hard stuff, and I think I have credibility with you guys. If you know, every once in a while I run into a guy that maybe isn't aware of my portfolio. I don't know, you know, but for the most part, I think I have credibility with you guys. So yeah, I'm gonna get the hard jobs, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that you know, you guys, I think a lot of the community is made, you know, it's like sometimes people need they need bad guys, they need somebody to point at, whatever. Poor Seth, you know, they've thrown the shit at him, and
Yeah.
the reality is he's a great guy. We interviewed a lot of people for the role, and we said, you know, if like whoever it is that's in that seat, if we can't work with him, or you know, we don't see that he's getting it, you know, he's got to get out, you know. So you know, he's still here, and I think he's doing great. I think that part of, you know, look, he listens, and he's in here in my office all the time saying, what do you think about this? So it's like, and I mean, he'll poll, you know, and he hangs out with the designers, and he loves to come down to the studio, flip the game, see what's going on, talk to me about this, talk to me about that. That's the part nobody ever sees, right? They only see, and so, but if you think about Gungate and you say, who should have answered that? Well, if Seth answered it, you guys were just going to throw more shit at him. So
Yeah.
I could, but so you know, I have some element of credibility with you, so I'm happy to take it. I'm happy to bring, you know, and you know, the cabinet thing, it's interesting, right? Like, there's a guy saying, you know, it's an MDF cabinet, you know. It's like, you know, my mic drop moment on the Kerry Hardy podcast was, hey, here's a Williams Congo. There are 2 pieces of plywood in the entire cabinet, and one of them is the coin door panel. Right? And the other one is like 8 inches by 27 inches. It's the panel that holds the back box on. The rest of the freaking cabinet is MDF. Yeah. And my cabinet is actually plywood, and you guys are like beating me up because it's you know, you can't put melamine directly on plywood. So they have you know, it's an HDF high density fiberboard, not even medium density fiberboard, high density fiberboard on either side, just to take the melamine.
I think the real mic drop moment was you explaining that you guys have been using that since 2018.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, you know, like what I wanted to do, the entire camera thing started with, I said, here's my Deadpool in my office. I got my trusty Swiss Army knife. I'm going to scrape the paint off so they can see that it's the same damn material. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you know, after the whole controversy started online, Ralph and Jamie, we were all talking about it so much, and Ralph was in contact with you, getting like real information.
Yeah.
That very night, we had a pinball tournament at Electric Bat, and one of our friends, Bob, that owns Atomic Age Pinball here in Mesa, Arizona, he's an expert woodworker. So we cornered him. We're like, can you?
We really did.
Yeah. Can you explain what's going on here? And he said, hey, Cale, that's no issue. That material is used in high-end cabinetry.
Yeah, it is.
It's better than straight plywood.
So think about this. You know, we're talking, as long as we're talking about it. Back in the day when it was a piece of plywood, the entire thing was plywood, and it got a coat of paint. And they're applying the decals to it, and they were floating the decal. So they were getting they're getting the surface of the plywood wet with soapy water, a solution of soapy water, right? And this is the instruction from the decal manufacturer on how to apply the decal. And I'm sitting there looking at this thing going, it's a piece of wood. It's not sealed. I mean, the paint helps to seal it, but it's going to absorb some of the moisture. So, you know, after dealing with, you know, the cabinet, the decal was perfect on the cabinet until it got to the other side of the country, and then you called me and it had bubbles in it. Why? Because there was air trapped underneath the thing in the grain of the plywood, and it found its way out, even though it wasn't here when it left, right? So, so I'm looking at all this, and I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way. The upright video game guys, the coin-operated video game guys, have been using melamine-faced MDF for years, and you guys know this, right? I mean, Ralph, you know this. Half the cabinets you had that you got rid of to buy your pinball machines were made out of that stuff.
Yes, 100%.
And so I said, let's just go to that. And then I said, but we were still, in those days, we were still using the locked miter joint. And so I said, but the core's got to be plywood, because the locked miter joint is not going to work with the MDF. It's not going to offer any strength at all. So we found this material, and we started using the material. So why go away from the locked miter joint? It's a beautiful thing, the locked miter joint. If you put glue in it and you staple it correctly and consistently, it's a beautiful, strong thing. However, at the end of a day, I had a situation many years ago, you guys may remember it, where cabinets were getting out to customers and they were coming apart at the seams. Mm-hmm. And when I root caused the problem, I got some cabinets. I got a handful of cabinets here from the cabinet manufacturer, and I took a rubber mallet to them, and I took them apart. And I look, and I was like, this one's got 3 inches of glue. That one's got no glue, right? The guy, and when the cabinet is painted, the structural integrity of that joint is invisible to me unless I do this destructive testing. So I look at this and I go, the guy built, I don't know how many cabinets every day, and he's talking to his buddy, or he's worried about what's going on someplace else or whatever, and he didn't consistently apply glue and staples to the cabinet. And to me, I have no way of knowing this. The cabinet looked perfectly fine when it got here, and it went down the line, and it fully assembled, and now it got shipped to the UK or something, and some guy over there, it's been on three trucks, 2 jets, I mean, it's like, and so I got, and the guy's saying to me, it's cabinet. So I don't know if you know this, but at one point in time, we started adding bolts to the, like at the lockdown bracket to hold those corners together. These were all like remedies to the notion that I can't tell once I get the cabinet. And I'm calling the cabinet house and I'm yelling at that guy and I'm saying, dude, you got to put some glue in those joints. The entire structure of the joint is based on the glue, even more than the staple, because the staple, the staple is only going to hold it so much. And what proved it is that, they had staples, but no glue, and they came apart. So now I got joints that have come apart in cabinets. A year ago, I had situations where people were getting games where they couldn't take the glass off, right? The glass was so tight in the games, couldn't take them off. And I'm trying to root cause all this stuff, and I'm reverse engineering things, and I'm figuring this out, and I'm thinking, it's a piece of wood. The stuff, what happens is, when that joint is tight, when that lock miter joint is actually glued and stapled tight, the wood and the temperature, the ambient temperature dries out, the wood is going to move. It's going to warp. And I have no way of telling, because when it left here, it was fine. But now it's changed environments. It's all kinds of things have happened to it. So I said, okay, so I need precision, I need accuracy, I need all these things. And as I thought about it, and I think I said on Kerry Hardy's podcast, I've probably designed 40 coin-operated game cabinets in my life. I started my career at Midway Games. Before they let me design any games, as an industrial designer, I designed cabinets and control systems for upright video games.
George, didn't you design the Tron environmental cabinet?
I did. I did the Tron environmental. I did the Tron upright. I did the Spy Hunter cabinets. I've done so many cabinets for so many different things. Some really weird ones too. I did the pods in the BattleTech centers. I did,
Did-
you know.
did you
it's
do-
really awesome?
You could live
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
Tron environmental cabinet. You could live in there if you wanted. You could. That was
You
like
could.
an apartment.
Well, the sales guys used to kid me that, you know, there were sleeping berths in the Tokyo airport back in those days, and the sales guys told me, when we can't sell this thing, we're gonna send them to the Tokyo airport. They're gonna be sleeping berths.
Did you design the steering wheel on Spy Hunter?
I did.
Man, that
Oh.
I love that thing. When I was a
That
kid,
is
I
cool.
couldn't
That is
just
cool.
grabbing that, like more than even playing the game, just grabbing that thing and thinking
Yeah.
how cool it was.
I did.
like
I sculpted those grips.
Wow.
I literally sculpted those grips out of wood. I have the pattern somewhere in a box.
Isn't
Wow.
the Satan's
so-
Hollow and Tron stick you too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that stick. That's very iconic.
And actually that stick first, I first did it for Gorf, for Dave Nutting's Gorf
yeah,
game.
yeah.
Mhm.
And
Oh.
then that's when I first did it. And then I used it in Satan's Hollow, and then of course I used it in Tron, and then in Tron, I think you guys have heard the story. We were having a problem with the switch inside, and I asked the molder to mold me a clear one, because back in those days we didn't have CAD. Right today,
Mhm.
today I can open up my CAD system, cut sections through things, turn things invisible, make stuff. And so I said to this guy, I said, I want to see what's going on with the switch. Can you mold me a clear one? The guy said, yes. So he molded me a clear one. I worked all that out. I happen to have those things laying around on top of my drawing table when we were working on Tron. And I always wanted to, I had seen, remember that we were developing the game at the same time the movie was being developed. So I was seeing very little bits and pieces of things, but I had seen like this business of everything glows, right? All these blue glows and stuff. And so I started thinking, how do I make the cabinet do this? And at the time, blacklight, fluorescent blacklights were very common in coin-operated video games. If you've ever had like a Space Invaders from that era, I think it's Space Invaders Deluxe. It has a blacklight.
It's in the back.
that-
Yeah.
that lights this little moon, this little 3-dimensional molded plastic moon. And the moon was painted in fluorescent colors so that it would excite from the blacklight. So I had a blacklight, and I was playing around with how to light stripes and things on the cabinet. And it was like 7:00 at night, and I'm leaving my office, and I turn off the lights to the office, but I had left the black light on, and the grip, the clear control grip that the guy had made for me to diagnose the switch, was sitting on my desk glowing blue from the black light. And I was like, I turned right around, looking like, whoa, that's what I
That's
gotta
cool.
do.
Wow.
So next day I called the guy, the molder, and I said to him, hey, this thing glows. And he says to me, he goes, yeah, it's got no UV inhibitors. You can't use it. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, oh, it'll self-destruct. I mean, exposed to sunlight or eventually. And I said, I want to shoot a blacklight. And he says, it's especially going to self-destruct.
Oh wow.
He said
like it
it's
would ruin
glowing.
the structural integrity of it if.
Yeah, he said
Yeah.
it's gonna disintegrate the plastic. So he said you need the UV inhibitors. And I was like, well, but I want this to glow blue. And he goes, well, what we can do is we can do an experiment, and we can add the 20% inhibitors, 10% inhibitors, 30% inhibitors, and see where you lose the glow. And because any inhibitor, and I told him, I said, it's going to be indoors. And he said, yeah, I know, but you're pointing a black light at it, which is like, just like putting it outside in the sun. So, that's what we did. And I arrived at, I had him mold me all these different variations, and that's how I did it.
I'm announcing
so
here
cool.
officially, George, that I am out of the pinball hobby. I'm actually going to start a woodworking, my YouTube channel and social media presence. It's going to be all about wood. It's going to be retro wood, and that's it. Like all we're going to talk about.
Retro Ralph Wood.
That's
You're
it.
gonna do great. You're gonna
Just
get a ton
wood.
of
Wood
views.
channel. Wood channel.
All right,
I
boys.
think, I'll tell you, there's so much thought. I have been working on this cabinet since like 22 or something. The very first prototypes were built at the end of 23 with my old friend Tom Copera, who's running the show over at JJP now, and you know, I have the thought that's gone into this cabinet. Nobody would know, right? Like those panels, they're all machined from one side to eliminate secondary operations that it can introduce inaccuracy into the process. The thing that they called me out on, those slots in the corners, which are, by the way, invisible once you put the leg on, that's because in the old cabinet, once you got the cabinet all screwed together, they put this giant drill fixture in it to drill the holes at an angle to the corner, at a 45-degree angle to the corner for the leg, right? And there was inaccuracy in that, because what would happen is if the fixture was seated properly, you got perfect holes. But again, you got this guy moving the fixture from side to side on the cabinet 4 times, and you have him doing this all day long, and then going at this thing with a hand tool. It's got drill bushings, but you know, it's like, I thought, so stuff, a lot of that stuff is the stuff that got designed into this new cabinet. Those braces, that's a common brace. This brace, by the way, here it is right here.
Here we go.
This thing, it's a piece of 16 gauge steel, and it's common 4 places in order to get an economy of scale. So it is the structure tying a lot of it together. Let's talk about the bolts. The thing about the bolt is that I can check torque on the bolt. So I know I can not only put a torque wrench on it, but if I have any doubt about the integrity of that particular joint or fastener, I can put a tool on it and check it. So, you know, and there's an additional element which I can only touch on briefly, but let's say that down the road, I want to do something different with one of those panels. I want a 3-dimensional panel. I want to light it in a different way, etc. I'm not starting from scratch because it's a module. I just replaced that panel.
That's cool.
We did things like, you know, we got rid of the bolts that on the side that for the, you know, for the slides. The art team, you know, they about threw a party because there was always some bolt that landed on some guy's face, you know, so they were always like shifting, you know, like shifting the art composition around the bolts. You know, you'll find some of our cabinets, like one side's got a silver bolt and 2 black ones to try to hide them, and the other side's got all silver ones or all black ones, whatever. So so much thought went into this thing. And the reason I reached out to Carrie was because I thought, man, I was like they're throwing this thing under the bus and they don't even understand half of it, right? Yeah. The material question alone, right? Carrie says to me, you know, we want to make sure that the MDF, you know, in a commercial environment isn't going to absorb moisture. I was like, okay, first of all, it's not MDF. Let's get that out of the way. But I said, second of all, see that 90s Congo? It's all MDF. And it's been on the street all this time. So I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
well,
it's
George,
a great cabinet.
We appreciate you going to that length of it, but we need to also call out the fact that when us three, we talk a lot. And when Kale and I like to geek out on tech stuff, Jamie, like, he leaves his body. Not only did he leave his body, he just left the podcast. He's like, I can't take it anymore.
I'm 4 Diet Cokes in, boys, and I'm struggling. Okay, I've had 4 Diet Cokes during this 3-hour podcast, and I had to go to the restroom. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah,
Let's wrap this
I can relate.
George, thank you so much for your time tonight. I thought this was an outstanding conversation. It's not hard for us to go 3 hours, so we appreciate you so much. Does anyone have any other things they want to add, gents?
No, I just want to say that, George, thank you for taking the time. And, you know, obviously we all appreciate what you do and what you've brought to the hobby. And it's nice to get this. We don't always get a look behind the curtain. And so it's nice to get directly talk to you as the source. And, you know, just to kind of get an idea of what's coming, what ideas Stern has. So definitely just appreciate the time that you took today. So
no problem. You guys, I've said this to everybody. I've said to Jason Knapp, I said to Kerry, everybody. I've said it. You have questions, you can ask. If I can't answer it, I'll tell you, listen, I can't answer that, or I no comment or whatever. But I'm happy to bring clarity to it, and I'm all about I want you guys to get to know us. I want you guys to understand that, we're not the evil empire. We're, we want the hobby, and we're not the evil empire. We don't hate the other guys. We want everybody to have success.
Yeah.
When they do well, I'm cheering them on. I don't, it's kind of like, I don't wish anybody ill will. I think that there's plenty of room. And yeah, we're the big dog, but so what? I'll tell you this. Nobody gave it to us. It was
Right.
hard fought. I sweat every day of it since I joined the company in 2011. And I am proud of what we've done. I'm proud of the studio I've built. The success of the studio is the success of the company. And yeah, that's it. And my advice to anybody is, there's that line, James Bond line. I've been trying to get it into the game. I'm probably gonna get it into the game in some future code release. But where he says to himself, he wants to chase the girl. He's in the car. He's in the Swiss Alps. He wants to chase the girl, and then he says, he thinks better of it. He says, "Discipline, 007, discipline."
I love it. That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
So on that note, good night, gentlemen.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you so much.
So
Thank
much.
you so much, George.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
See you guys.
See you, everybody.